across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell, in for Julia Hartley-Brewer, who's not too well. We send you our very best wishes, Julia. I'm here today between now and 1, and tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, all in the same time slot. Loads to discuss, especially if you have an angry face, because you could be a racist if you point it out. Yes, really, Britain 2025. We're talking about Kemi Badenoch, talking about Keir Starmer, calling him the caretaker Prime Minister. Loads of new members of the House of Lords as well. How serious are Labour really about Lords reform when they're appointing all these people? We're talking as well about childhood criminal records to be wiped by David Lammy and police forces changing as well. Also, two questions that I have this week. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, said that national insurance rises haven't led to unemployment. I think that is absolute bunkum. Similarly, the Prime Minister said yesterday at Prime Minister's Questions that he believes that the energy bills are not going up. I put out a very simple tweet about this yesterday, and loads of people have been in touch. I'll be reading out some of those replies. Similarly, if you have views on that, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Doctors could still strike during the superflu outbreak as well. We're talking about Ukraine. We're talking about policing as well. Peter Blexley will be here, and that big story that Mark Dolan was talking about during breakfast as well. The grotesque puberty blockers experiment. People have been in touch with me already about that. We'll be talking about that later on with Mayor Forstater, who's the Chief Executive of Sex Matters. Also, a story sent in to me by a viewer. Always get in touch with me if you see something. This is someone who spotted something on the tube, not actually someone from London, actually someone from elsewhere in the country, spotted these ads saying that we should boycott Coca-Cola. Well, TfL, Transport for London, says they're not actually sanctioned, but there are lots of things around that as well, especially in regard to Israel, because Coca-Cola has a bottling plant in East Jerusalem. There's also police chiefs from West Midlands Police. The first time a chief constable has been called back to Parliament because the information he gave was shoddy at best, lies at worst, I would say, although I would expect he would deny that. We'll also talk about whether the BBC has a metropolitan bias. One thing we always remember every single day here at Talk is that 82% of our viewers and listeners are outside London. I may be sitting in London talking to you right now, but we're not all about London. We're about right across the UK and indeed around the world. And wherever you are, I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, on 0344 499 1000. That's the number for calls. That's the number for WhatsApp text messages as well. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, let's talk to Lord Hayward now, Robert Hayward, who's a Conservative pollster and peer, about what is going on in politics, because Sir Keir Starmer gave the green light for the punishing budget tax raid, according to Rachel Reeves. It's interesting as well, Robert, isn't it, that she said that she doesn't believe that national insurance rises led to greater unemployment. There are so many people who have contacted me after I put that on Twitter and simply asked. Chris Hume, for example, he is a business owner. We used to hire 2 to 3 apprentices a year. We're a growing software business. Now we just offshore junior tasks. Low-skilled labour and trainees are simply unaffordable now. The cost of the company is a way out of kilter with the value they bring. It's not their fault, but it is true. Clear issues for businesses here about the political decisions the Chancellor has made. Robert, what do you make of it, and what's the polling impact?
Well, it's quite clear if you take money out of people's pockets, whether they're individuals or businessmen and women or whatever, and put it into the Treasury, that's less money in the economy, with the net result that that's fewer jobs. It's sure as day follows night. You can't take money out of people's pockets and not have an impact on employment. And as that businessman's just said, he'll go offshore. He'll find other ways of solving issues that he would previously have solved by employing people. And that's a truism not just about national insurance contributions, it's about taxation in general.
And energy bills is another thing I'm really interested in talking about because of what happened at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday. I just want to play a clip now of this exchange between your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, and Keir Starmer, asking Keir Starmer about energy bills. I think this isn't true either. Let's see what Keir Starmer said at Prime Minister's Questions.
Let's start with the Energy Secretary, who wants to recycle himself as leader. He said he'd cut families' energy bills by 300.
And play it again. I'll get the people behind the scenes to tell me when we're ready to do that. Let's play that clip from Prime Minister's Questions right now.
Let's start with the Energy Secretary, who wants to recycle himself as leader. He said he'd cut families' energy bills.
We just have an audio problem on that, but it was Kemi Badenoch saying, talking about the Energy Secretary who wants to recycle himself as leader, she said. He said he'd cut families' energy bills by £300. Keir Starmer said, I'm very pleased to say we're taking £150 off and it's a joke. I could also tell her that that's on top of the £150 we've taken off last year for the 3 million poorest families, now for 6 million for families. She says that I asked him about energy bills, he could power the national grid and all that hot air. He promised to cut energy bills by £300. Now, this is not a scientific survey, but of the dozens of people who got back to me when I asked them specifically, has anybody's energy bill gone down? And similarly, has anybody saying that national insurance rises haven't led to unemployment? And not a single person believed either of those statements. What do you think, Robert?
I think the significant message is that thing on the front page of the Times this morning, which says that energy bills, individual energy bills, and one has to remember it's also company energy bills and therefore employers' energy bills, which means it's jobs, are going to go up as a result of the net zero targets. There may be some people for whom a bill has gone down, but clearly the understanding overall is that energy bills are rising. There may be a slight variation in relation to the energy cap, which originally arose out of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But in general, inflation is there, people are feeling it in their pockets, and it comes back to the question you asked initially about national insurance contributions and the impact on the polls, whether it's an energy bill, whether it's national insurance contributions, etc. There is clear evidence that the current government is the most unpopular newly elected government there's ever been. It's not that newly elected now, but the Starmer and Reeves favourability ratings are at minus levels, which are unknown in polling terms ever.
It's interesting as well, even some of the polling done of Labour members puts Keir Starmer at -3, and when you ask favourable or unfavourable and put that together, that's perhaps not the most scientific polling, but nonetheless is polling that is interesting. I wonder how much you see things going, the trends you see going in regard to the, what I believe is a strong anyone but Nigel movement, the ABN movement I call it, where there are people who are clearly coalescing on the left to do all they can to keep Nigel Farage becoming Prime Minister. I think we saw a bit of it in Caerphilly. From your expert view, do you think this is something that is happening, and the impact on the polls, and how there are people who in marginal constituencies may well vote tactically to keep Reform UK out because of the hatred and demonisation of Nigel Farage?
I think there may be some of that. There is initial indications of tactical voting. People's analysis of tactical voting is probably overdone, the expectation of it. At the moment, most of the flux within the Labour Party, not just within MPs or peers, but in the Labour Party in general, is they're not concentrating on Nigel Farage in terms of stopping him. At the moment, they're desperately trying to find an alternative to Keir Starmer. And you could say ABK, anybody but Keir. And the conversations that you have in Parliament at the moment, which you will be aware of, are such that it is, at the moment, Kemi Badenoch said yesterday, caretaker Prime Minister. That is very clearly the impression that the vast majority of the public, of the Labour Party, feel. It's a question of who and when, not if.
Yeah, Yeah, very, very interesting. What do you make of the fact, you're a member of the House of Lords, of course, Labour is getting rid of the hereditary peers. They've appointed a couple of the hereditary peers now as life peers, so that membership of the House of Lords will end when those people die rather than being passed on to the son, if there is one. I wonder, Robert, what you think of this, because Labour said they've never said they want to abolish the House of Lords necessarily. They've talked a lot about reform of it. There was reform, some reform under Tony Blair when he got rid of all of the hereditary peers, apart from, I think, 92 of them. What do you make of the fact that Labour is appointing so many peers now? They would argue, of course, they don't have a majority in the House of Lords, so actually this is sort of evening things up to some degree. But with an appointed House of Lords, it's still one of the biggest legislatures in the world.
Yes, and the House of Lords will get smaller when the hereditaries finish, which will be at some stage in 2026. And it will still be quite a large second chamber, but it's supposed to be a house of experts. I'm afraid, I think it's fair generous to say, but that Boris was somewhat generous with his awarding of peerages, and Labour are saying that this is their response. Two wrongs don't make a right. And what is striking about the list that was published last night is that it will add to the anger of many of the Labour MPs, members and peers, because if you look at the list, there's 25 new Labour peers. They are centred on the Westminster bubble, and overwhelmingly, if they are not in the Westminster political bubble, they are actually councillors in London. 2 from Southwark, 1 from Lewisham, 1 from Hackney, 1 from Brent, 1 from Islington. Then if you look across the whole of the rest of the country, there's one person, one councillor from Newcastle. And therefore people outside London this morning in our house are saying, what are we worth if all the awards go to people in London?
Yeah, it's a very, very good point, and one certainly that we'll continue to talk about throughout the programme. Certainly when it comes to the BBC, they've been accused of having a metropolitan BBC London bias, a little bit of Manchester bias as well there. We'll talk about all those issues. I just want to play you a voice note now, Robert, about someone who's been in touch about this puberty blockers issue, a big, big issue today. This is Elisa in Chelmsford, who has a very strong view about it.
Good morning, Peter. Now, look, I'm not one to use the Nazi term lightly, but I honestly feel that using children for medical experiments in the way this dreadful government intends to is tantamount to child abuse and what Nazis did to their victims. How can anyone of sane mind think this is okay? It is not okay. Is there nothing we, the people, can do to stop this madness?
Certainly a very strong opinion from Elisa in Chelmsford there. What's your opinion on this puberty blockers story?
I have to be cautious because I'm not a medic, and I have worked with the MHRA, who are the people who've approved this trial.
This is the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency.
And I have a good regard for them, but I'm inherently extremely cautious about any form of trial in these sorts of circumstances. Sadly, Peter, I'm old enough to know that puberty blockers were used by the East Europeans for their gymnasts, the Nadia Comaneci and the Olga Korbits of this world, and it was certainly not generally perceived as good medicine then. So I have doubts in my mind, but I'll leave it for the medics to be more specific and more detailed in their analysis.
Robert, thanks for your contribution this morning. That's Lord Hayward, Robert Hayward, the Conservative pollster and member of the House of Lords. What do you think about what he was saying there about these new peers that have been appointed, and indeed about puberty blockers as well? 0344 499 1000. We now do have that clip on what Keir Starmer said at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday. This is about energy bills. He was questioned by Kemi Badenoch.
Let's start with the Energy Secretary, who wants to recycle himself as leader. He said he'd cut families' energy bills by £300. Can the Prime Minister tell the House how much have energy bills fallen by since the election?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to say we're taking £150 off energy bills. I I can also tell her that that's on top of the £150 we've taken off last year for the 3 million poorest families, now for 6 million poorest families.
Mr. Speaker, I asked him about energy bills. You could power the national grid on all of that hot air. He promised to cut energy bills by £300. Energy bills have risen by £187.
So I think there are two mistruths at best that the government have told us this week. One is from Rachel Reeves, where she told Parliament that she did not believe, this was in a committee session, that she did not believe that national insurance rises had led to unemployment statistics. Secondly, Keir Starmer saying at Prime Minister's questions yesterday that that energy bills are going down. If your energy bills are going down, or if you think, as maybe a small business owner or someone who works in business or the private sector perhaps, if you're, in your van at the moment going to a job and you employ a few people, if you're someone who is the owner of a small business who has us on the radio in the background or on the screen in front of you in your office, I want you to give me a ring right now and tell me if you believe Keir Starmer and if you believe Rachel Reeves. 0344 499 1000. Are your energy bills going down? And do you honestly think that the rise in national insurance has not led to unemployment? 0344 499 1000. Michael in Northamptonshire, I know you're a managing director of a company. Michael, tell me your experience.
Hi Peter, how are you doing?
Hi there, very well, thank you.
So we're a Japanese company. We employ in the UK, we're a sales operation and supporting what we sell, the products we manufacture in Europe, all right? So we have around 85 employees, all right?
Yeah.
And so when the national insurance increase came in, our baseline cost just on the national insurance increase went up by around about £200,000.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Right? That's absolute fact, all right? So Rachel Reeves can pop along and sit down with my financial director and he'll explain that to her, all right?
Yeah.
So that feeds direct. Now, not on top of that, then, we also had, we have something like 2,000 customers, all right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they vary from, small, like the people you were just talking about in a van,
yeah,
to people, to company. I just left a company that employs similar number to us, all right?
Yeah.
And they have reduced the number of apprentices that they take on, all right, as a result of increased costs, increased taxes. Let's just be clear.
Yes.
Increased taxes, right?
Yes.
Because that comes off the bottom line. That's where it comes. All this stuff that the government's levying on businesses comes off the bottom line. It has to come from somewhere. How do we get that back, right? So we've had to increase our prices, yeah? Now, we can only do that, the market is competitive. We have to be careful. So you sometimes can't increase, certainly to recover it. That's the point.
Yes.
You can only do so much.
Yes.
So push comes to shove, and we're a company that, we have a young team as well. We have a good spread of ages in our team. We really do value young people. We try to take on as many as we can, but we will, last year and this year, we will have employed around 2 or 3 people less because of these costs. Yeah. These costs.
Yeah.
And don't forget.
Well, that's it from the horse's mouth, Michael. And that is exactly the experience, or a similar experience, that so many people have had. And when Rachel Reeves sits there and says that she doesn't believe that national insurance rises have led to unemployment, what goes through your mind, Michael?
Well, she's stupid, right? And she is, and I'm sorry to say that, all right? But she is, all right? She's lying to us, all right? Let's call it what it is. People call it gaslighting. We've got to stop using that word. It's plain, simple lying to people, all right? Lying, that's it. That's what it is. And it's not necessarily, if they just could be straight and say, look, and explain, like the nonsense we just had for the last number of months, there'd be all the kite flying about tax increases and whatever.
Yeah.
Has had a severe effect. I can show you orders that have been cancelled because companies were nervous about what was going to happen in the budget. All right.
Yeah. Do you think Rachel Reeves? Do you think Rachel Reeves and this government actually understand? Peter Cardwell is the business secretary. Do you think they understand the life you lead? Do you think they understand people who make money for this country? 44% of what the country makes is now in the public sector. That's what it does. It goes to pay for the public sector. Do they think they understand the wealth creators, the people who get up in the morning and actually create wealth for this country, like you, Michael?
Yeah, not at all, right? So I would say, do you know what? I was actually listening to Peter Cardwell, it was a week or so ago. He was actually, it was like a rare moment of honesty where he talked about that before the budget, where he was saying that they were aware that we're pushing entrepreneurs out of the country, all right?
Yeah.
And I thought, blimey, all right? I nearly fell over, all right, when I heard that. But they still carry on with policies that, you know, that actually do that. But they don't. When you've got a government of people that, I think that the figure I heard was 90% of them have never, in the cabinet, have worked for a private business.
And I don't think a single one of them has run a business either, Michael. So listen, thank you for your call. I think you've just illustrated that point really, really well from your personal experience. And if you're someone like Michael, you want to add to the conversation, you give me a shout, 0344 499 1000. Paul sent me a tweet, said they have lost their minds. My advisory firm works with a number of small and medium hospitality firms who are all looking to make savings to offset higher costs. Another person says, as an accountant, I work with many client companies that have made redundancies. Some have refused to hire new staff, most have put all training on hold, and several have ultimately decided to close entirely, leaving everyone out of work. On energy bills as well, another person says, not only energy bills, Yorkshire Water just announced the hosepipe ban has ended. They've increased their water bills by 31%. That is a disgrace. If I could swap to another water provider, I would. Unfortunately, as you know, it's a monopoly. Stephen says, my energy bill 4 years ago was £70 a month. It went up to £190, now £130, so technically fallen, but so is my consumption. However, just been notified it will go up another £70 a year. It's up and down all over the place. And yes, there are a number of people who've been in touch on this particular issue. Kevin in Stafford says, my energy bills have gone down by about £10 a month from last year, but it's got sod all to do with this lying cretin in number 10, says Kev. I've just turned my heating thermostat down by several degrees, wash with a lower temperature in a machine and sit with fewer lights on, but more clothing to stay warm. This is the paradise that Keir Starmer is creating. Seriously, get in touch. Let me know your experience. 0344 499 1000.
Some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK on DAB+. on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, do you think I have an angry face? Do you have an angry face? Maybe you have a resting face, which has a word in it I'm probably not going to say at this time in the morning, but we've all heard it. Sandra Moody is a black teaching assistant. She won a race discrimination case after students and staff said they were scared of her because she had an angry face. Telling someone that they have an angry face could be racist, according to employment judge Patricia Tujay, who said the complaints were based on a negative racial stereotype, failing to consider that Ms. Moody's supposedly angry face was simply her resting face. So there we are. This is where we are in this country. She was accused of having a harsh tone and being aggressive towards children before she was fired. There are lots and lots of different stories around today. That is just one of the crazy ones that is brought to us by a judicial system that I think needs serious reform. Danny Shaw is police and crime and justice commentator and is with us now. Danny, it's great to have you on the programme as always. The Afghan rapist who we were talking about previously, these are asylum seekers who raped a 15-year-old girl. They're playing Jenga, they're playing Xbox, they're enjoying film nights, and they have a shower in their cell. That is a life that many people would certainly welcome, and far better than some of the people who are talking to us about their very high energy bills. We just read out a message from Kevin who says that he's switching off lights, turning down the heat and wearing more warm clothes. Yet these people who are raping children are receiving a prison life that is far better than the lives that many people have, even when they have the freedom.
I'm not sure that they'll be enjoying their time at Werrington Young Offenders Institution near Stoke-on-Trent, Peter, despite those headlines. For a start, they will be targeted because of who they are and because of what they've done. That institution was described recently as unsafe by the prison inspector's report. He said there was too much violence, excessive violence. The young people there were kept in their cells for too long, sometimes for days on end. The leadership there was described as inadequate. So I think the picture that you've painted, which are headlines I think taken from the Sun newspaper, don't really represent the reality of life at the Young Offenders Institution.
I think the sympathy from our viewers and listeners will probably be quite limited towards these.
I don't have sympathy for them, Peter. I'm just giving you the reality of what I think it is.
Sure,
like
and I'm not saying
I have no sympathy for those two.
And I'm not saying for a second that you do, Danny, absolutely not. The used young offenders institutions, that one you mentioned, is clearly failing. Yet they cost a huge amount, don't they? Because to have someone in prison in a normal prison place is something like £55,000 a year, yet in a young offenders institution is 2 or maybe 3 times that. Why are they so expensive? Is it to do with the level of staff? Just paint a picture of that from your expertise, Danny.
Well, because the young people that are in those institutions are generally, they've generally committed or have been accused of very, very serious offences. So you need a lot of staff to ensure their safety and the safety of others. We don't actually lock up many young people in England and Wales. The numbers are around the 400 mark. If you go back 15 years, they were probably closer to 2,000 to 3,000. There's been a big drive to get young people out of custody, but what it means is that those who are in custody have committed or been accused of very serious offences. So you need a lot of staff to ensure their safety. Many of them have complex problems and needs, mental health problems. Some have, extremely difficult upbringings and family backgrounds. That's not an excuse for their offending behaviour, but it might explain it. And that's why they do need as well some support, because the worst thing, Peter, is that all of these young people, without exception, will be coming out. And if they come out and just commit more offences, that's going to be more harm to people like you and me and other vulnerable people in the community.
And that's always the argument that I always tried to make when I worked at the Ministry of Justice as a special advisor. Unless you're kind of Rose West or Wayne Couzens, or I think it's 75 people or whole life sentences, you're going to get out, and we need to think very, very clearly about what those people are like when they come out. I want them to pay taxes. I want them to have a roof over their head. I want them to have a job, because that would mean that they don't, a lot of the time, commit crime again and harm people's lives. Let's talk about another aspect of your expertise, Danny, which is policing. Labour have been talking about merging forces. There are 43 police services in England at the moment. There's just one in Scotland and one in Northern Ireland. I just wonder what sort of cautionary notes have been raised about this, because the plan is not to have one single English police service, but to have a few of them, but far fewer than 43. What do you make of the criticism, and what do you think would work in terms of a number of police forces?
If you were designing the police service of England and Wales at the moment, you wouldn't design it as it is. If you were starting with a blank sheet of paper, you wouldn't have 43 police forces ranging in size from City of London Police, which has fewer than 1,000 officers, to the Met, which has over 30,000, and all sorts of police forces in between. It doesn't make sense. It's not, from a cost point of view, it's really poor, because you have the same back office functions in small forces as in big forces. Plus you have on top of that there are a lot of crimes that cross borders and boundaries. But if you're dealing with the system as it is, with 43 forces, and trying to rationalise and save a bit of money, if you go very quickly to 12 or 15 forces, that's going to create huge upheaval. It was attempted before by the Labour Home Secretary Charles Clarke 20 years ago. It completely failed. And Shabana Mahmood the current Home Secretary, needs to be very careful when she's considering police reform about going down that road. I do think that there are some forces which could merge, and it would make sense for them to merge. There are a few that are on their knees financially, like Lincolnshire is one of them, that are really, really close to basically going bankrupt. And this could be a way, if some forces merge, that could actually save them financially. So it might make sense for some forces, and particularly in governance terms, but she needs to proceed with great caution, because otherwise local people will feel that, if their local force is being subsumed into a much bigger one, that policing in their community will be jeopardised.
Although so many people feel that they don't have a link to their community force anyway.
Exactly.
I wonder, the biggest crime, the highest reported crime in terms of numbers, I think is about 43% of the crimes that are reported are fraud. And so much of it, of course, happens online. About 3/4 of fraud happens online. And of course, that can happen in any part. It's not as if it's like a geographically specific crime, like someone being mugged, happens in a place. Whereas cybercrime, of course, can happen all over the place. It can be one person sitting in, for example, Lincolnshire, defrauding people in Liverpool, London, Manchester, whatever. And the fact is that those happen beyond borders. So I wonder if you think even the kind of concept of a local force is perhaps an outdated one.
No, I think you need the local connection. It's really important. People want to see cops in their neighbourhoods, and they want to know those cops, and they want them to know the local problems. So that's really important to have that local connection. But you're right, there are some crimes that are not necessarily locally based. Online fraud is probably one of them, although there is some fraud that is still perpetrated in traditional ways by local fraudsters. But online fraud is a good example of something that there should be a national unit which then investigates frauds, and if there's local arrest to be made, then that's distributed to local forces to carry out. We have a patchwork in terms of fraud. We've got the Serious Fraud Office, which deals with the top end, most grave fraud crimes. Then you have the City of London Police responsible for national fraud. You've got an economic crime centre at the National Crime Agency, and then you have a lot of forces have their local fraud units. It doesn't make sense to me. I do think there needs to be a shake-up of the way that we deal with fraud, non-online fraud in particular, and Shabana Mahmood has got an opportunity to do it, because there will be a policing white paper next year.
Danny, thank you as always. Danny Shaw there, police and crime and justice commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper as well. Lots to discuss on all of that. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Steve says my combined electricity and gas bill will rise by £600 next year. I've had the emails through. Both rates and standing charges have gone up. Ian has been in touch with a voice note on his bills as well.
Talking about energy bills, water bills, I've noticed that one bill I got, and I think it was the water, the standing charge was 1/3 of the cost of the whole bill. I mean, how absurd is that? And on the one hand, they said to me in the letter, oh, you've got a reduction now in your cost per unit. And then they said, but however, your standing charge has gone up by 40%. I mean, it's complete nonsense. And the standing charge is all linked to this green rubbish anyway.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Ian. If you have thoughts to add to that, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to talk about a story in just a second about attempts by Keir Starmer to reform the European Convention on Human Rights. Is it actually going to work, or is it going to be another attempt to go to a European institution, reform something, it doesn't work, and then the country gets very, very angry about it? Remember Brexit? I think we probably do. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's hear that clip from Rachel Reeves. I'm going to bang on about this right through to 1 o'clock, and if you've got thoughts on this, do give me a shout on 0344 499 1000. This is Esther McVeigh, who is a Conservative MP. You'll be familiar with her. She's appeared on Talk many times, asking the Chancellor about jobs and about national insurance hikes. This was on Tuesday in the House of Commons. This is what Esther McVeigh said, and then the Chancellor.
Does the Chancellor believe there is any link at all between her increase in employers' national insurance contributions, her job tax, and employment levels slumping to a 14-year low?
Yeah. It's just wrong. Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the number of jobs has increased by 329,000 this year. That is the record of this government getting people back into work, and also through the Youth Guarantee, dealing with the fact that when we took office last year, 1 in 8 young people were not education, employment or training. That is your record. This government are addressing it.
Rachel Reeves there apparently not believing that there is a link between the national insurance rise and the unemployment problems this country has, and also not that government is a collective noun, but that's another matter. Attempts to reform the European Convention on Human Rights are another issue that this government is dealing with. They want to make it easier, they say, to deport foreign criminals and agree offshore migrant deals, but they're doomed to fail, according to the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick. I want to talk to Guy Dampier now, who is a senior researcher on nationhood at the Prosperity Institute. Guy, thank you for joining me this morning. What exactly does Keir Starmer want to do? Because he has a resolution of the 46 members, which is very woolly, and there's not really much substance to it that I can see. And then there are 27 members that have another resolution that may well slightly change how we deal with human rights and how we deal with deporting migrants as well who are here illegally. Just take us through it and tell me what you think.
Good morning. So, as you say, what we've got is we've got a joint statement by 27 of the 46 members, and what they're essentially calling for is they're saying we need to be able to deport foreign criminals. Currently, under Articles 3 and Article 8, that's often blocked. And so what they're essentially saying is we want to change the way that the Convention is interpreted so that we can deport foreign criminals without those articles becoming an issue. Now, the problem is, in order to change the actual convention itself, you need all 46 to agree, and they're not going to. Very noticeably, France and Germany are not part of this 27. There seems incredibly low chance that they will, and some of the other ones would only agree basically if you gave them a bung or something else. So that's not going to happen. Secondly, you can go through a long procedural reform. David Cameron did this, it was tried before that, and at the end of the day what you get are some minor reforms that don't really change anything. And then, as Robert Jenrick pointed out, even if in a wonderful world David Lammy and Richard Homer do indeed get all the reforms that they want, nonetheless, that doesn't affect all the other things that the ECHR has impact on, including democratic politics, the economy, and all sorts of other areas. So it's a well-intentioned but extremely unlikely to succeed effort.
David Lammy, the mastermind himself, and Richard Hermer, the Attorney General, if they don't, the crack team there, if they don't get the results we want, I don't know who can. Labour is spinning this and saying all 46 are agreeing, this is all marvellous and wonderful, but actually what the 46 have agreed to, as you've said there, Guy, is pretty woolly and not very much. It's the 27, it's the other resolution that's more important, but actually persuading those other countries, they're not going to be persuaded, are they?
They're not going to be persuaded. I mean, a lot of them have got very strong views on this, and as I said, France and Germany, who are two of the most important countries, neither of them have signed the statement by the 27. So clearly they're not in agreement with even the most basic levels. That means that nothing really is going to happen, and without having all 46, you're up to asking the court itself to change things, which it could do because of the living instrument doctrine, which allows it to reinterpret the convention in light of modern events. That's always been used to expand it, generally in a left-wing direction. Now, they could conceivably expand it rightwards in a more sensible direction, but they've shown absolutely no indication of doing so. And I think if you believe they're going to do that, then, well, Santa Claus will be paying you a visit, and I'm sure you're leaving milk and cookies out for him.
Well, indeed. And the interesting thing, of course, and I mean, Father Christmas will be paying me a visit. I'm looking forward to it. But Guy, it's interesting actually, just in regard to what the plan is here, and the fact that Keir Starmer really thinks, or would appear to think, that he can get a serious difference here. That's just going to be very, very difficult to do. And the Conservative Party and Reform UK are saying they want to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. Is that in itself going to solve all the problems when it comes to deporting people who are here illegally? Because surely so much of the European legislation is embedded as part of the structure of our constitution. Even if we withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, it's not a panacea, is it? Because it's in case law, it's in convention, isn't it? It would take much more. I just worry about politicians when they come on and say, if we withdraw from the ECHR, all our problems will be over. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely true. If you just think leaving the ECHR will fix everything, then you're wrong. But that's because we have to unpick, as you say, some of the domestic stuff. So the Human Rights Act is the key thing you'd have to go after. That puts those conventional rights into domestic law. So you'd have to leave the ECHR, you'd have to get rid of the HRA or seriously reform it. But although some of these bits are tricky, we have to remember, Parliament is sovereign. If they want to change things, including case law, they can simply change the law. Yeah. Now, at the moment, they're more constrained, because if they try and change the law and it would breach the convention, then judges can say it would breach the convention and then parliamentarians have to think again. If you're outside of the ECHR, however, you can just do it. So it would be very doable, but they do need a plan. It can't just be, we're going to leave and that's it.
Guy, thank you. There's Guy Dampier there, who is Senior Researcher on nationhood at the Prosperity Institute, a think tank there in Westminster. Fiona says our water bill went up 36% to nearly £1,000 last April. We decided to go on a water meter. Our half-yearly bill was £250, and I was worried as I've been watering the garden. My 88-year-old father, who lives alone, also went on a meter, and his bill dropped from £98 a month to £12 a month. I urge anyone, if you're single or a couple, go on a meter. Thanks, Peter. Fiona, I'd love to go on a meter. When I moved into my flat 4.5 years ago, my bill was, I think, £47 a month, something like that, for water. Now it's £98 a month. I'd love to go on a meter, but Thames Water won't put me on one. Mick in Wallington says, send Miliband and Starmer over to my place. I've not had hot water for over a year. I turn the heating on when I start to shiver and only put a light on when I have to. I have a very angry face, says Mick in Wallington. Mick, thank you for that. I'm sorry to hear you're going through such a difficult time there. Brian in Worthing says, morning Peter, could I possibly get Ed Miliband's email? Because I've just heard from my energy supplier that my bills will be going down by, wait for it, £1.52 per year. I must feel I need to thank him. I'm over the moon. Brian, I'd love to say you could, buy him a Crunchie and post it to him, but actually you couldn't do that for £1.52 with the price of crunchies and the price of a second-class stamp these days. I know because I've just sent my Christmas cards out. Thank you to Dan, who says Rachel from accounts put taxes on things like milkshakes because it will curb sales. It makes sense. She puts taxes on jobs and thinks it doesn't curb jobs. Whatever you tax, you get less of. Thank you, Dan, for that. We'll be talking to an economist, Laurie Laird, in just a second about all of this and getting your views too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's hear a voice note from Dawn, who sent this in. You can send in your voice notes as well. Less than a minute, please. 0344 499 1000. Do it through WhatsApp. Let's hear what Dawn has to say.
We own a small business. We were supposed to have 11 people turn up for a trial day yesterday, and only 3 turned up. And out of the 3, 2 of them only wanted part-time because it would affect their benefits, and it just was not worth it. But we're not employing more people because we can't afford, based on the fact we've got increased national insurance and taxes.
Dawn, so many people are contacting me this morning, and you can too if you're a small business owner, if you work in a small business, if you have an experience similar to Dawn's. I mean, this is just nonsense that the Chancellor is talking, that national insurance rises haven't led to unemployment. Let's just play that clip again. Esther McVeigh, the Conservative MP, holding the Chancellor to account on this. This was in Parliament on Tuesday.
Just the chance to believe there is any link at all between her increase in employers' national insurance contributions, her job tax, and employment levels slumping to a 14-year low.
It's just wrong. Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the number of jobs has increased by 329,000 this year. That That is the record of this government getting people back into work, and also through the youth guarantee dealing with the fact that when we took office last year, 1 in 8 young people were not education, employment or training. That is your record. This government are addressing it.
Laurie Laird is with me now, The Economist. Laurie, every single piece of information I have, okay, it's anecdotal, but I've got dozens of people contacting me, actually probably hundreds now if I look at all the messages coming into this station this morning, saying Rachel Reeves just talking nonsense here. What do you think?
You know, Rachel Reeves got a little bit lucky in that employment was quite high when she came into office. So some of those, look, raising the national insurance contribution for employers is going to hurt hiring. Raising the national living wage by the amount that it was raised in the past 2 years is going to hurt jobs. She was quite lucky that employment was at quite a high level before she even started. So had employment been a little ropier 2 years ago, I think we'd be feeling this even more. And I think the key thing here is that there was very little in this budget. She made the numbers add up, but there was very little in this budget that will lead to growth. My God, what have we heard for the past 2 years? I will do nothing. Everything will be about growth.
We don't hear a lot about that. We don't hear a lot about that now, Laurie. We really don't.
And I think there was a count on how many times she mentioned it in the budget. I think it was only 12 times. Remember growth, she would use the word growth 12 times, in a paragraph a year ago.
A noun, a verb, and the word growth would be in every sentence.
Absolutely. You got a little tired of it. And it was weird because you got to the point where you thought, does she even know what growth means? Do voters know what growth means? Or has it just become this throwaway word? But there is nothing in this budget. Again, she made the numbers add up, but there's nothing here that will spur growth. We're not in an unemployment problem right now, but it is really interesting hearing that anecdotal stuff, Peter, because the numbers we're getting on unemployment, the Office for National Statistics has said our labor force numbers are not good enough at the moment. We're making these changes. We're hoping in the next year to get you better numbers, but we're much more reliant on this anecdotal stuff to know what's happening, to learn what's happening in the labor market.
Absolutely. And energy bills are another aspect where this is happening. The Prime Minister was questioned about this at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday by the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. Let's have a look at that.
Let's start with the Energy Secretary, who wants to recycle himself as leader. He said he'd cut families' energy bills by £300. Can the Prime Minister tell the House how much have energy bills fallen by since the election?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to say we're taking £150 off energy bills. I can also tell her that that's on top of the £150 we've taken off last year for the 3 million poorest families, now for 6 million poorest families.
Mr. Speaker, I asked him about energy bills. You could power the national grid on all of that hot air. He promised to cut energy bills by £300. Energy bills have risen by £187.
Laurie, let me just read you what Jackie has sent me on WhatsApp. She says, I'm fuming. I live alone. My monthly utilities bill has gone up from £99 a month to £306 a month in the last 2 years. I work for a family hospitality business that employs about 1,700 people. The national insurance increase cost is £2.2 million more for the same number of hours we used last year. This has meant that we've had to increase prices and reduce staff hours to try and break even. This government's policies are a joke. Laurie, what do you make of that?
Well, the way that we price energy in this country is an absolute mess, Peter. Even before we talk about net zero, let's talk about how the government has chosen to price energy. We price energy at the price of gas. That's the sort of what we use as to the number to price the marginal rate. Now, wherever you are on the net zero or wherever you are on global warming, once you build the infrastructure for wind, for solar, the marginal cost of generating energy is zero. So there are days when more than half of the energy mix is produced by renewables, yet we pay, which is, again, pretty much free when you generate it. Yet even on those days, we're paying for energy based on the price of gas, which can be extremely expensive, particularly for the UK, because we don't have a whole lot of it. We import it. We don't have a whole lot of storage. So the way that the market is structured is completely wrong. And that is something the government could address.
You're absolutely right. Will they, though?
Well, I don't think so. This government feels like, at least economically, it is about survival. We certainly haven't had anyone talk about repricing the electricity market. It's kind of confusing. This government is trying to, sort of copy what the Conservatives did with let's work in slogans. It's not working. What I just described is complicated. I do really appreciate you letting me be geeky on your show. You're very good to me that way.
Well, one geek to another. One geek to another, Laurie. I mean, it all has to be encouraged. Listen, thank you for your explanation of that. I really appreciate that. That's Laurie Laird, the economist, joining us this morning. Simon is in Reading. Simon, I don't think we've spoken before. Simon, you're very welcome to the programme. What's your perspective on Rachel Reeves?
No, we haven't spoken before, Peter. Basically, it's just a very quick, just listening to you as I was driving into work, and just as I have done many times, and just felt like this time I needed a comment. I'm not saying she's lying or she's just very misguided or completely incompetent, but we're a small business. Myself and my brother, we employed probably 10 people at the peak. We're now down to 6. We haven't enforced any redundancies, but we just allowed natural wastage to take its toll.
So you're not replacing those people. If people are leaving for whatever reason, you're just not replacing them because of the economic circumstances that you face, Simon?
Correct, absolutely, 100%. And regarding the energy bills that you also spoke about, as a business, we used to pay, it's not quite as regulated as domestic users, but we were paying somewhere for our electric sort of £350 about 2 summers ago or 2 winters ago. We're now paying £750, £800 a month.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So, I mean, will you survive? Will you be okay? Because there are so many businesses that are thinking, actually, is this worth it? I spoke to someone the other day thinking of opening a pizza restaurant, putting in an investment of £400,000. And then in the end of it, they just thought, actually, yeah, this would employ 7 or 8 people. But what's the point?
No, we survive. I mean, we just cut our cloth accordingly. But I was 60 last month, thinking about retirement in the next few years, which has just accelerated that process. So I'll be one of those that will be looking to take up life somewhere else in the Mediterranean or somewhere else rather than in this country. I just don't see.
I think a lot of people feel the same way, Simon. Listen, thanks for your call. Great first call. Don't make it the last one. Ring me anytime. You've got some great life experience to talk about there, and whatever your opinion, whether you work in a small business or whether you don't, whatever you think about what Rachel Reeves and the Prime Minister are saying, you let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call on puberty blockers as well. Amanda's been in touch and says it is completely and utterly insane to even contemplate interfering with young children's path to adulthood. I truly believe these people need to be arrested or institutionalised, says Amanda. Similarly, Reg says, Peter, it's common knowledge now that Rachel Reeves and her sidekick Keir Starmer tell more lies than a counterfeit watch. Lots more to talk about in the next hour here on Talk. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell in for Julia Hartley-Brewer, who's unwell today, and we wish her very well and hope she's back very, very soon. Lots to discuss this morning, including the puberty blockers and the fact that so many people want them banned. We'll talk as well about Keir Starmer giving the green light for the punishing budget tax raid. That's what Rachel Reeves is saying. She's also saying that she doesn't believe that the national insurance rise has led to unemployment in this country. Well, we've just had Simon on there a minute ago telling us that in his experience, that's just not the case. He runs a small business with 8 people, absolutely typical of the small businesses in this country, the backbone of the economy. We'll be talking as well about Britain in talks with Argentina over lifting Falklands-era weapons bans and the ECHR reform that Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, says is doomed to fail. We'll talk about the flu crisis as well. Some of our colleagues off with flu and policing issues. Peter Blexley is coming on as well, on my favourite foreign affairs journalist Mary Dejevsky. We'll be talking about Ukraine and how close we are, or indeed not, to a peace deal there. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. I want to make sure, as I always do, to get as many calls, texts, tweets and voice notes on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk. We'll talk as well about criminal records of children, and Mick says, does Mastermind Lammy intend to expunge the criminal records of the murderers of James Bulger from Merseyside? I certainly hope not. At least one of them has a criminal record from adulthood as well. Taff in Dover says, morning Peter, has Rachel Reeves actually spoken to anybody in the hospitality industry and how the national insurance raise has affected their business? That is Taff in Dover there. Aid in Tamworth says, Starmer keeps saying electricity prices are coming down by £150. I've just an email from British Gas saying my electricity costs will be going up on January the 1st. They're just out and out liars. Leslie says, I thought all bill payers' bills would be reduced, not just those on benefits. And Jane says the reason Starmer doesn't realise the cost of energy bills is because they claim for them in expenses. They should pay their own from now on. No front benchers on both sides should be claiming it. Well, that's certainly in regard to second homes. They do pay them for their main homes. And we have to have parliamentarians in London, their constituencies or elsewhere, should they get subsidies for those second homes? Well, that's a debate that'll continue to rage, and if you want to give me your thoughts on it, then 0344 499 1000. Before we go to our guest, I just want to play a clip of Esther McVeigh, the Conservative MP, asking the Chancellor Rachel Reeves about jobs, about how national insurance is working in this country or not working. Let's hear what was said in the House of Commons on Tuesday.
Does the Chancellor believe there is any link at all between her increase in employers' national insurance contributions, her job tax, and employment levels slumping to a 14-year low?
Yeah. It's just wrong. Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the number of jobs has increased by 329,000 this year. That is the record of this government getting people back into work, and also through the youth guarantee, dealing with the fact that when we took office last year, 1 in 8 young people were not education, employment or training. That is your record. This government are addressing it.
Also, the Chancellor has said the Prime Minister was taken through all of the numbers and all of the options before making final decisions on the budget last month, that budget where she put up 43 different taxes. She was asked by the Treasury Select Committee about all of this. She said the Prime Minister and I met 2 or 3 times a week during the budget process. That is not always the case between Chancellors and Prime Ministers. I recognise that, but there's a very close partnership between myself and the Prime Minister. And so we took him through all the numbers and all the options. We decided to together as a team because that is what the Prime Minister and I am. let's speak to James Ball, who's political editor of The New World. James, you're very welcome to the programme today. We've had numerous people, dozens of people, contacting me. They work in small businesses and saying that national insurance rises have led to jobs being shed. They have led to businesses making very big decisions about not employing extra people. What do you make of what Rachel Reeves has been saying this week?
I think she's in something of a tricky position, especially on national insurance. The reality is that this budget was relatively well received by the actual financial markets. UK government debt has got cheaper. It's got cheaper relative to the US. The spread has closed. It's actually sort of reassured people in terms of the borrowing, the government's responsibility, the spending. So some of it is good news for her. But some of the ways she's done it have been particularly hard for businesses. I think especially small businesses who employ people part-time, perhaps on minimum wage, they've been whacked by several minimum wage hikes in a row. They've got rising costs elsewhere, inflation's still not under control. And for the first budget, those hikes to employers' national insurance were brutal, and especially for part-time workers. And I don't think there's really a way around that. Labour can argue that it had to find the money because under Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt did two quite major tax cuts that he couldn't afford just before the election in a bit of a desperate ploy. But instead of just reversing them, where they could have legitimately blamed the Tories, they did this clever employers hike too. And, you know, I speak to people in small businesses. They are struggling with this. That is not false. That's not political. That's real.
Yeah, and certainly they would have asked why Rachel Reeves felt she needed to do that. Certainly she talked about a black hole, the OBR. We were familiar of the big controversy regarding the Office of Budgetary Responsibility and whether that black hole exists and what it will look like and all the rest of it. I wonder, just when it comes to energy bills, the Prime Minister spoke yesterday in the House of Commons about this. He was probed by Kemi Badenoch. Let's just remind ourselves what she asked him about energy bills and what he said.
Let's start with the Energy Secretary, who wants to recycle himself as leader. He said he'd cut families' energy bills by £300. Can the Prime Minister tell the House how much have energy bills fallen by since the election?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to say we're taking £150 off energy bills. I can also tell her that that's on top of the £150 we've taken off last year for the 3 million poorest families, now for 6 million poorest families.
Mr. Speaker, I asked him about energy bills. You could power the national grid on all of that hot air. He promised to cut energy bills by £300. Energy bills have risen by £187.
Certainly those rises in energy bills have been felt by so many of our viewers and listeners. James, what do you make of what the Prime Minister said last night? Or yesterday afternoon, I should say, because there are so many people who are really questioning the veracity of what the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are saying here. Are we being gaslit?
I don't think we are on this one. I think the tricky thing is that there's a lot of different bits that go into your energy bill. There's just the cost of generating it, and that depends on things like the oil and gas price, the wholesale, and they've gone up. When Rachel Reeves announced in the budget that there was going to be a cut to energy bills, that's real. They're basically taking some of the net zero costs, they're called policy costs, and moving it into general taxation, which means you're paying it from another bit of your bill, let's be honest. But the energy bill will come down. That sort of standing charge will come down next year, and that will be worth between £150 to £300 for most of us. Now, whether that was politically worth it, who knows? Because it's quite expensive to do it.
But I mean, I'm just sitting
Reeves
here.
wouldn't have to raise as many taxes if she hadn't done it.
I mean, I'm just sitting.
And it's £10 a month. Will people notice?
Well, that's a very good point, James. And I'm just sitting here with so many people getting in touch with me saying they've already been told their bills are going up. Now, that might be for slightly different reasons, but you can understand why people are at least sceptical when they hear the Prime Minister saying your bills are going to go down by £150 or £300, when so many people, that is just not their experience.
Oh, I completely sympathise. I can see why people are wary of this. I can see why people feel burned several times. There is a policy measure in there that will take some money off. But if other costs are increasing, if people are coming off deals, it might mean that for them, their bills just going up by less? And why should they trust that Reeves has done anything for them when, let's be honest, they have been quite shifty and quite dancing around various points on this budget, even if at its core it hasn't done that much. It certainly hasn't put on new costs to the bills that weren't there before. It has done something to take them off. But I completely see why people feel sceptical about that. I can understand that.
Tell me your thoughts on rough sleeping. This is something I know a bit about. I worked as a special advisor for a year and a half in the housing department, and the measures that we put in got rough sleeping down to 2% in the first year and 9% in the second year. It's something that I feel really quite passionately about. There are two main types of homelessness, as I know you know, James, but there are perhaps people who don't know the two main types of homelessness. One is people in temporary accommodation, who are maybe in bed and breakfast, which is often a dreadful thing. And then there are people sleeping on our streets. Often when people think of homelessness, they just think of people sleeping on the streets. But there's sort of rough sleeping, and then there's people in temporary accommodation. But the government is launching a homelessness strategy. It wants to halve rough sleeping in the next 5 years and reduce the number of people living in bed and breakfast. I mean, I remember Baroness Neat, who's the head of shelter, telling me on one occasion, Peter, the babies don't learn to crawl because there is not enough room in the bed and breakfast for them to be able to do that. It's an absolutely disgraceful thing, both people living on our streets and people in that temporary accommodation. It's something the government needs to do a lot more about. Now we have Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, criticising the Prime Minister about it. I will criticise Andy Burnham for many things, but I know from personal experience that he really does care about this issue. But perhaps, and I don't mean to be cynical about this, but perhaps a secondary element of this is that he can be seen to criticise the Prime Minister in this. How much politics is in this, do you think, James?
I think, unfortunately, there's a healthy mix of politics in this. As you know better than I do, you've done a lot of work on this. Rough sleeping is one of those rare problems where actually the government can almost abolish it. They can pretty much fix it, and it's happened before. This is doable. Ending the use of temporary accommodation is much, much harder and maybe even impossible. You can reduce it. But rough sleeping, at different points, we've had virtually at zero under different governments. And I think for a Labour government, especially a Labour government that's trying to make a bit of a case that welfare spending is important, that people get vulnerable, I don't think anything less than getting rid of it is a decent goal. I think they should be doing this. I think pressuring them is good. I think there is some very heavy wariness over any time Andy Burnham criticises the government at the moment, because let's be honest, he completely misjudged it at Labour conference.
But he continues perhaps to be on manoeuvres. Let's talk about another political issue just before you go, James, and this is about the European Convention on Human Rights. Robert Jenrick says reform of that is doomed to fail. Can Keir Starmer get the kind of reforms needed so that we can actually deport people who are here illegally? If people go through an asylum claim, they are rejected for that. Some people, of course, are deported, about 4,500 last year, but there are problems and many appeals are made under human rights legislation. What do you think of this?
I think Robert Jenrick's in a tricky position here, because it's not Keir Starmer's initiative, but it's something he's jumped on and helped. They're trying to get a political reform of the court and a new interpretation of those laws for the judges. Now, Denmark started this effort, and when it started it only had one ally. It was Denmark and Austria. There were two countries. About 6 months ago, there were 9 governments that were on board to try and do this. There's now 27, and that's huge momentum in just 6 months. And the UK is kind of behind organising this. There's 48 in total. This isn't a European Union thing. This is a Council of Europe thing. So there's already a majority of governments. They're pushing to try and see if they can get a statement everyone agrees. I think it's a little bit tricky for Jenrick to say it's impossible or it won't do anything when, he sat on this brief. He was there on justice, and he didn't manage to get this far. And so I imagine, selfishly, he's probably rooting for it to fail. But there's actually some solid progress here. There's some consensus with governments of quite different political stripes in Europe that it is possible to have these human rights, but to say, no, the way the courts have been interpreting them is too strict, is wrong, the balance is wrong. And I think if it's doable, that would be quite a significant win.
It'll be very interesting to see.
It's like Cameron's negotiation in Europe.
Well, those are the echoes certainly that I was thinking about from 10 years ago, or 11 or 12 years ago, certainly. Listen, thank you, James. Very good to talk to you. James Ball there, political editor of The New World. Let's take a call now from Dave in London. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 about his bills. Dave, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
You're in luck. I pulled over to Greg's half an hour ago to get myself a sausage roll and a coffee.
Oh, you're making me jealous. Did you have ketchup with a sausage roll?
No, it'd be brown, right?
Oh, you're a brown sauce person. I'm a ketchup person with a Greg's sausage roll. Yeah, big fan of Greg's, I must say. Anyway, on the point of your bills.
Okay, here you go, bills. So I went through them because I keep them all on email. So this is a 2-bedroom flat in London. 2 people in it, and it's this is just electric. Gas is different, but this is British Gas, but the electric.
Yeah.
Okay, June 24. This is right on the election, right? So this is the first. So they in June 24 they said, congratulations, your bill will be going from 714 to 666 beginning July 1st. So that's 3 days before the election.
Sure.
Ironically, you get a bill more or less every quarter, and they give you the good or the bad news.
Yes.
Now, for some strange reason, in December 94, they said, not congratulations, your bill's going up £9 from 798. I don't know where 798
Right. I mean, that's higher than originally, yeah.
Yeah, to 807. So, oh dear.
Yeah.
Then September this year, it's going from 725, so I don't know how it got from 807 to 725.
Well, you use a bit less electricity over the summer or something like that. That sometimes happens.
Well, yeah, but they wouldn't they have said it's going from 807 down? But
yeah,
anyway,
I feel a bit like Bruce's Price is Right here, Dave. You know, they're going higher, lower.
Yeah, so let me get to the point. So December, the bill from Sunday says it's going from 725 to 759, so it's going up £9. But you could argue the key dates there are 666, July the 1st when the election happened.
Yeah.
To 759 now. So whatever 666 to 759 is the difference. Is what is the question Kemi asked?
Yeah, it's gone up by nearly £100. Yeah.
Yes, so that's there you go. So I did the research, and by the way, I thought Kemi did very, very well this week.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. She's getting better. I've been very critical of her, but she's getting better, Dave. Listen, thank you for that illustration. I really appreciate it, Dave. And you're making me very jealous of the old sausage roll there, I must say. It is 20 past 11, and I'm getting a bit peckish, I must say. But listen, thank you, Dave, for that. Thanks to everybody else who has been in touch as well. Including Alison and Billericay, who says, Peter, nice to see you. Thank you, Alison. I didn't have to pay any energy in BST because I spent a fortune on solar panels and a battery last year, which I'm paying for in lieu of bills, which is good in a way, but I was expecting to make money in order to clear the loan. So while it wasn't terrible, it does show that even if you generate your own electricity, it's still more expensive than it should be. The short days and heating bills in the winter will be terrible for everyone, says Alison. Dan and Kent says, this insane drive for net zero will have irreversible consequences for our economy and way of life. China, India and the United States are benefiting from cheap energy while we fall behind. It's not like we live in the 1950s with smog and pollution. We've never been so clean with energy. It is madness, says Dan. We're going to talk about the winter fuel crisis next. Professor Carl Hennigan is standing by. We'll talk about all of that. And the Conservatives accusing Nigel Farage of hypocrisy over claims he never wore a mask. Stay with us.
breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for all your comments coming in, including about the boycott of Coca-Cola. There are ads on the tube. Apparently they're unauthorised. TfL, Transport for London, have told us that the tube trains in London. Brian in Westcliff says, oh, the irony of calls for a Coca-Cola boycott because of its plant in East Jerusalem. Had the Palestinian leadership accepted previous peace deals covering Gaza and 96% of the West Bank, their capital would be East Jerusalem, complete with Coke as a multinational employer for the Palestinian people. Well, you know my thoughts on Coca-Cola, very pro. And thank you to Trevor as well. He says, if you remember, David Cameron went to the EU to try to negotiate. He asked for very little, but was offered terms that were worse than before. The EU will never learn, even when it's collapsing around them. I think we need to just go back to a common market, and Keir Starmer has no chance, although he doesn't really want to change it anyway. That's Trevor in Harrow there. So thank you for all your messages that continue to come in here on Talk. 0344 499 1000, of course, is the main number. Now then, Peter Blexley is with us, the former Metropolitan Police detective. It's great to have you in the studio, Peter. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. Very well.
It's a very, very important day. The 11th of December is, of course, Peter Blexley's birthday. So many happy returns to you.
Thank you.
I said you have a very happy face today because it's your birthday, if I said you had an angry face, would I be a racist?
Well, it's kind of bizarre, this whole situation that has arisen out of an employment tribunal that stemmed from a school in South East London where a black teaching assistant who was called Sandra Moody was described by some of the children and staff as having an angry face. Now, I have a certain amount of sympathy with Sandra Moody over this one, because many a time I've stood in front of a professional photographer who would be taking pictures for me, perhaps for a newspaper article or a magazine, and they've said to me, smile. And I've said, I am smiling, right?
Yes.
And they say, well, smile a bit harder, would you please?
Right.
Because my natural default position of my face is perhaps not a joyous one. And let's face it, with a Labour government, who can blame me? But anyway.
Mrs. Moody perhaps looking a bit moody.
Yes, and I think here, essentially, because we've stripped away so much common sense out of the United Kingdom through tribunals and appeals and courts and unnecessary prosecutions and the such like. A case here that I think could have been dealt with a bit of common sense. They'd never have got to this. Why wasn't Miss Moody allowed to talk to pupils from the front of the classroom about her face and about how people sometimes have naturally smiley faces and naturally grumpy faces, like mine, for example, or perhaps Miss Moody's. But no, because, of course, discretion and because the ability to kind of negotiate or use common sense seems to have been stripped out by this pernicious desire to run off to a tribunal and go and see a solicitor.
And there will be people, Peter, who are actual victims of racism. There will be people who have been denied job opportunities, who've been shouted at, spat at, racially abused simply for the colour of their skin, who will be listening and watching to this, who will say, I'm an actual victim of racism. She is perhaps not, because people say, well, you got a little bit of a resting angry face. That's I mean, therefore this stereotype of what black people is angry, I mean, it's nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. And the fact that this was brought up, and lots of things are brought up in a tribunal, but this story is just, it just takes the biscuit. There will be so many people out there of all races and religions thinking, where is the common sense in all of this?
Absolutely. And of course it will have come at significant cost to the public, to the taxpayer. Sandra Moody's won her case in so much as the tribunal ruled that she was prejudiced against. There were a number of other factors here as well that came into account, including her manner, not only her face and what have you, but it's just common sense has been stripped out of society. This could have been dealt with, couldn't it, quite easily?
Well, and so many things could have been dealt with very easily by someone just having a bit of a word and applying a bit of common sense. What do you think, more speaking of ethnicity more generally, we're told that the Home Secretary says the information should be collated about the ethnicity of offenders, but apparently service leaders say that's never entirely possible, it's never 100% possible. Why?
Well, it won't be 100% possible because some people will offend and not get caught.
Yes.
They'll be wanted.
Yes.
So, of course, we will never know the true ethnicity, cultural background or religious background of an offender like that, for example, who simply never gets caught. And what people haven't discussed yet, and they should do, is what will be the position if somebody refuses to self-identify as being from a particular nation or a faith or a culture. What happens then? Will people be compelled to do this by law? In fact, what I think should happen is that police forces should be compelled to record this data by law. And the reason I say that, because I'm not a big fan of more rules and more regulations.
Yes.
That's not my natural default position. But I know that flaky, fluffy, liberal, wokey police chiefs, will bend over backwards to not record ethnicity because they will be afraid of creating, drum roll, racial tensions. The kind of nonsense that led to the rape gangs committing serious, abominable crimes with impunity because police chiefs were afraid to tackle them because of stirring up racial tensions once again. So I think in order that we, the public, and the police services and everybody else who may have an interest in this can be properly informed as to who's committing what crime, they need by law to record that data.
Tell me about David Lammy and his plan about to expunge childhood criminal records. We've already had people being in touch saying, hold on a second, what about Jimmy Bulger's killers here? You know, if people are responsible for things as children, if they're sometimes locked up, not very many of them, a few hundred of them in young offenders institutions, well, surely there should be a record of that.
Yes, there should be, and they are not actually proposing to completely wipe them. The proposal is that when somebody who perhaps might be in their 30s, for example, okay, I'm hypothesising now, who committed a crime when they were 15, not of the most serious nature, but perhaps a crime of theft or fraud or perhaps a less serious assault. When they get to their 30s, for example, if they're applying for a job, should something they did when they were a headstrong teenager at 14 or 15 hold them back from getting that job? Well, I think that would depend upon the offence they committed and, of course, their attitude to their offending. I come from the school of give people a second chance. Not everyone.
But interesting that David Lammy is talking about expunging childhood criminal records and saying, like, if someone did something reasonably minor offence, not something that we would ever excuse, but something like what you're discussing there, that maybe 20, 30 years later when they're an adult that shouldn't be brought up. But very happy for something that Nigel Farage actually denies saying when he was 13 years old to be brought up now. Very interesting thoughts on that. I wonder what people at home think. 0344 499 1000. Just before you go, Peter, I wonder what you think about these plans to merge different policing forces. What are your thoughts on that?
Very interesting. Let me go through the benefits fairly rapidly, if I may.
Sure.
We have 43 police forces at the moment in England and Wales. If they came, and the figure 12 is being bandied about, so if we reduce them in number and increase them in size, purchasing power by those police forces would be hugely increased. For example, in terms of buying uniforms, vehicles, drones, commissioning helicopters, forensic services and the such like. Bigger is better because of the procurement purchasing power those organisations would have. And that would drive down costs, which I would be fully supportive of if the savings made were then ploughed in to putting police officers on the street. And I don't mean on four wheels, I mean on 2 feet, because I'm repeatedly told by the public that's what they want. Visible, known, contactable police officers in their area that will then go and tackle the antisocial behaviour, the crime that blights their neighbourhoods, shoplifting, knife crime, and the such like, and so much more. That's what the public want. That's what they're being denied by police chiefs. So if those savings was converted into a visible, known, trusted presence on the beat, I'd be in favour of that. There is a precedent here. Police Scotland in 2013 combined the 8 forces north of the border into the unimaginatively named Police Scotland. Okay.
Has that worked, do you think?
In some regards, possibly. In other regards, it's still blighted with so many of the problems that are afflicting policing the length and breadth of the country. They've just had a deputy chief constable suspended for bullying. There is another senior officer who I know, but I can't say anything at the moment, will be facing more discipline sanction. Very senior police officers. So their senior ranks have not got it right. And therefore, if the top isn't getting it right, it's no surprise that the front line makes its mistakes. There's been some benefits in terms of solving historical murders, not all of them, and particularly not Alistair Wilson, but in some regards, it has shown some success.
Okay. Peter, thank you. Just as it is your birthday, we have lots of people contacting us saying a very happy birthday to Peter Blexley. Imagine people wanted to show their appreciation and perhaps hear more from you on a future date, perhaps in 2026. What would you say to them?
Please go to peterblexley.com and purchase tickets for my nationwide tour, which happens next year. It's a true crime show like no other. Bring your brain, bring your curiosity, bring your thoughts, be an armchair detective, sit in that theatre. I've got a real conundrum for you.
Sounds great. peterblexley.com is the place to get the tickets for that. Although some venues are already sold out, I know, such as the popularity of the birthday boy Blexley himself. Thank you very much for your contribution, as always. We are going to speak, as promised, to Professor Carl Hennigan, the NHS warning of the worst case scenario as the super flu surges. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Anne and Kent, who says, Peter, I run a small business and need to take 1 or 2 additional members of staff on, but we are not doing so because of the new employment legislation that's coming in, giving ridiculous rights to new employees who can take you to a tribunal for an unlimited amount. We've been crippled by national insurance increases, and in April we have a 40% increase to our business rates. Loads of people in touch about this, about business rates as well. Spike, one of my regular correspondents, great guy in South Wales, sent me his local pub. The rates went up by more than 100%, and this is something I'm very, very aware of. Do get in touch if you have experience on that. 0344 499 1000. Anne says, we will battle on, but quite honestly we are seriously considering closing the business in the near future and moving overseas. This is the experience of so many businesses directly because of the policies and actions of Rachel Reeves. We're hearing it all the time from our viewers and listeners. They're all saying really interesting and different things, but the core of it is all the same. Let's talk about the problems that the country is having with the winter flu. Carl Hennigan is Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford and joins me now. Carl, thank you for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Doctors could still strike during the super flu. West Streeting hoping to get a positive result on all of that. What's your take on that, Carl?
Well, I think if you look at the strikes, the real issue here for doctors is about the training needs and the jobs. If I said to you, look, by August, only about 10% chance of you staying in a post, I think you'd be worried about your job. And this escalation has happened because we've let lots of doctors from around the world take these training posts, and therefore we've spent hundreds of £1,000s training all of our junior doctors. They get to a position now and they're saying, well, there's no jobs for us come August. So I think what's happened here is the screws have been tightened, and eventually West Streeting has done what he should have done all along, is stay in the room talking, working out what the issues are. I do hope we can, this new offer, I think many of the doctors will see this as a positive step, come to an escalation, but it's not we're not going to find out till Monday the vote that's happening for those to return to work.
Many people will see...
Big issue though here is, Peter, is
Sorry,
that
go ahead.
actually the predictable rise in flu that's occurring every year is now becoming an annual event for me to come on and try to say, number one, we all need to calm down.
Yeah.
Number two, though, at some point, we're going to accept what we're doing currently isn't working, and we need to start planning for this predictable rise in flu cases and accept that sometimes they're all calling it unprecedented because it's come a week earlier than usual.
Yeah, exactly. And also, we're hearing the government and NHS providers as well saying, the head of NHS providers, who, to my knowledge, is not a medical doctor, saying that we should wear masks as well, Carl.
Well, the important thing is people in these positions, I have to say, they revolve so quickly. By the time it comes next year, it'll be a whole cadre of new people in place. And what he said is you must wear a mask. That sort of statement is unacceptable. People are free to choose what they want to do, but the NHS should be clear, should be basing its policies on high-quality evidence. And there isn't high-quality evidence to support the use of masks in the community. They didn't work in the pandemic. There will not work to change what's going to happen now. The most important aspect is if you're symptomatic, you should be very thoughtful, particularly if you're around people who are elderly or immunocompromised. And I think your last call said it all, which was, it's about using common sense.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And we are, of course, the home of common sense. On masks themselves, the Conservatives have actually accused Nigel Farage of hypocrisy. He claimed he had never worn a mask during the COVID pandemic, but he said, I didn't wear them last time and I won't wear them this time. But the Conservatives have uncovered apparently 2 photographs of him wearing masks during the lockdown period. Does that matter, Carl? Is that something you care about?
Well, I think, to be fair to Nigel, I think there will have been certain settings he'd gone into, for instance, in healthcare settings, where it was mandatory to wear the mask.
Yes.
So I think, look, in those situations, you have to give people a bit of leeway and say, look, you were going into a care home, you were going for your vaccine in a healthcare facility, you had to wear a mask. I think what Nigel is probably referring to, where the option was, I chose not to do it. And I think, look, that's a sensible strategy. If it's a mandatory requirement, I will do it. if it's a option, then that should be a different situation. I don't think we score political points here. There's a much more important issue at hand. We need to develop interventions that do make a difference to transmission in high-risk environments like hospitals and care homes, but we refuse to do that, and therefore we'll end up in this situation every year where we're arguing sillily about whether masks work or not, and people are making bad decisions and scoring political points.
What should we be doing? I mean, you mentioned there that there are things we could do in places like care homes, for example. What should we be doing to try to arrest this?
So remember, I said the word flu. It seems to be now we've scoped out. The word flu can encompass all of the different viruses, of which there are about 20 plus circulating at the moment. Influenza is one of them. Most people who have influenza will know because they'll be so unwell, they won't be leaving the house. So if you're symptomatic, it makes sense for you to be common sense and say, look, I'm going to take a couple of days. I'm going to take a couple of days off work. The most important aspect of everything we do, which is particularly with the norovirus, is to wash our hands regularly. So if you go and touch people or you go to see people, you come in and out, wash your hands regularly. That's particularly important for the viral gastroenteritis, which is what seems to have shut the school in Wales for 2 days. I know we lost everything about a 2-day closure, but actually they did a deep clean because they had diarrhea and vomiting, which is much more suggestive of norovirus than a problem with influenza.
Yeah. Carl, listen, thanks very much for your analysis this morning. Much appreciated as always. Carl Hennigan there, who's Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. Lots of people still getting in touch about bills. Please do let us know what you think about masks and the flu and all what Carl was saying, and indeed what Peter Blexley was saying, but specifically the big questions I'm asking today as well about whether you believe the Prime Minister and the Chancellor saying that national insurance rises haven't led to unemployment. The evidence of many people getting in touch is that that's not the case. I know it's anecdotal, but our viewers and listeners are all entitled to their opinion here at the Comb of Common Sense. We'll get as many calls, texts and tweets on air as we can. Also, the bills that the Prime Minister says, energy bills, are going down. This person says, I asked Thames Water for a water meter for years, but they always said they were unable to do so. When the bills started going up this year, I informed them that I was not going to pay my bills and they were not getting a penny. Lo and behold, I had a water meter within 2 months. Another person says, Peter, I hardly used my gas last month. When the bill came, the standing charge was £23 and the bill was £2. It's discussing someone making a lot of money. Great show. On the ECHR as well, Leslie says it's not the ECHR that's the problem, but the extras that the UK gives the refugees, which no other country provides. And Debbie in Huddersfield says, I'm on a water meter and recently received my annual water bill from Yorkshire Water, who have estimated that my usage will have trebled over the next year. This is nonsense, as there are only 2 people, sometimes 3 in the house. My bills increased from £65 a month to £103 a month. I haven't had time to sort it out yet, but will be leaving the property in the next couple of months, so hope that I've overpaid and will get some sort of refund. I don't hold my breath, says Debbie. Huge rises. I experienced it myself. As I said, when I moved into my flat 4.5 years ago, about £47-48 a month for water. Now it's more like £100. Lots more to discuss, not just on bills, but also on whether we are closer to a deal in Ukraine. My favourite foreign affairs analyst, Mary Dejevsky, is with us next, and whether Zelensky will go forward. He's finalising a 20-point peace document and will be presenting it to the United States. Relations between him and Donald Trump, not so good at the moment. We'll get Mary's analysis on what may happen in just a second here on Talk.
some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Steve, who says the only reason people are up in arms about immigration now is because it is hitting Middle England. For decades it has blighted the working classes. These people are now up in arms of the same ones who call the working class racist, but now it's on their doorstep and they don't like it, says Steve. Speaking of racism, apparently it's racist to say someone has an angry face. That was in a tribunal recently, and Nick has been in touch with me to say that Ina Sharples is the person who he thinks of when he thinks of an angry face. Nora Batty similarly as well, or me when I'm concentrating and when I'm reading something I sort of go like, oh, like that. I always look a little bit angry. Stuart says, good morning Peter, good morning Stuart. Just why should ordinary people who have lived a normal life be told just that they can or can't do and what they've done is right or wrong by a complete and utter numpty like Mastermind Lammy? Gail and Harrogate says, it's amazing how David Lammy wants to expunge criminal records for children, but quite happy to demonise Nigel Farage for something he said at 13 or 14. Yet again, two-tier rules depending on what suits the agenda. I'm just so sick of the lies and double standards. Let's talk now about Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky saying that he is finalising a 20-point peace document and will be presenting it to the United States soon. Trump says strong words were exchanged during calls with European leaders. Funny, Number 10 didn't tell us about that when they sent us an email readout of the discussions between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer recently. They must have just missed that off the list for some reason. Mary Dejevsky is a foreign affairs analyst, columnist at The Independent, and my favourite commentator on these things. Mary, where are we with this peace deal?
Well, we seem to be somewhere different practically every day.
Yeah.
Where we seem to be now is that Ukraine and the Europeans and the Americans seem actually to be talking about the same document. Now, you know, if that's true, then that's quite a lot of progress, because until now we've been looking at one document which was said to be a list of points, sort of not exactly agreed, but discussed between the Americans and the Russians. And then we had either the same document heavily edited or a different document discussed between Ukraine and the Europeans. Now, since the phone conversation, it appears yesterday, between the European leaders and Donald Trump, everybody seems to be talking about the same document. Now, if that's true, that is quite a lot of progress.
Mm-hmm. How much pressure do you think the Americans are putting on Zelensky here? Because Steve Witkoff, for example, the US envoy, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who now seems to be more involved with these things. He was very involved in the first administration of Trump and seems to have taken a bit of a backseat, but now involved again in foreign affairs. They're said to have told Zelensky the president wants to see a peace deal agreed within weeks.
Yes, I think there's quite a lot of pressure being put on Zelensky, and I think you can see that in a way in two ways. But the first suggests that Zelensky isn't entirely averse to some of the things that are going on, because yes, I think it was in his nationwide address that he does every evening, but I think it was last night, where he was actually talking about the possibility of having a ceasefire or an end to some sort of end to the conflict. He was talking about days. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I'd heard anything either so specific or so really optimistic in that sense from Zelensky.
But the big issue is, of course, land. isn't it? It's the Donbass
Yes.
region. It's the
Yes.
the fact that Zelensky says, look, constitutionally, he's not in a position where he could give up land, even if he wanted to. Plus, he doesn't want to anyway.
Yes, that's all entirely true, and we've had some sort of what appear to be insights into some of the bargaining going on about this, in mostly I think in the American press, where they've been looking at sort of precedents, including the North-South Korea precedent. Now, none of that will be at all welcomed by Zelensky, but there's another aspect of this which has suddenly come onto the horizon in the last couple of days, which is that it's not clear whether this is because of American pressure or what it is, but Zelensky is talking about the possibility of holding elections. And if he were to hold elections...
And they haven't happened, I think, since 2019, and he's been criticised quite a lot for that. I mean, obviously it's difficult to hold elections when your country's at war, but nonetheless, conditions have improved to some degree anyway in the last nearly 7 years.
Sorry, there's a parallel for me with the land question here, because Zelensky has always said, to do with elections, that he couldn't hold elections on time because of martial law, and martial law excluded holding elections. And now you may be talking about either martial law possibly being lifted temporarily if there was some sort of ceasefire in place. But he is talking about holding elections. And if you can, as it were, alter or manipulate the constitutional situation to hold elections, then maybe you can do something similar with the land question. Say if Zelensky had a new mandate or somebody else had a new mandate.
Do you think in your heart, sorry to interrupt you, Mary, do you think in your heart of hearts there can be any peace deal without land going in a Russian direction?
No. I don't think that's entirely possible. I think it's what form it takes, and what are the sort of judicial, what's the judicial framework for that. And I think that the very least that will be possible is that land is ceded to Russia, but it's not given legal recognition. And there are all sorts of precedents for that. Just a return to the election question is also interesting, because one of the reasons that Vladimir Putin has said that he won't, as it were, talk to Zelensky is that he claims Zelensky currently is without a mandate because he didn't hold those elections. Now, what if Zelensky does hold a mandate, and either he or somebody in his place is elected, who will have a mandate? Now, presumably then Putin says, okay, we've got somebody who's empowered to negotiate with us. So all these things are in play, and they're very interesting things being in play.
Certainly is, and great to have your analysis of it, Mary. Thank you, Mary Dejevsky there, Foreign Affairs journalist, columnist for The Independent. Appreciate you taking the time to chat to us today. Loads of different people getting in touch about all sorts of issues. Joe says Health Trust in Northern Ireland have said staff in front-facing posts must wear a mask, and they should advise all visitors and patients to also wear them. Can you give me your thoughts on that, Joe? Well, listen, those medical grade masks and the ones that people who are dealing with, people who are drilling things and have particles and so on, the medical grade ones, maybe. But I'm not going to go around wearing them, and I'm not sure most people are on the tube. But the little ones that are just, the paper ones, they really do not work. And Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford, said that. We've also had Professor Carol Sikora saying the same thing. I think people are rushing to this far too much and need to take a bit of a chill pill in all of this. The reorganisation of police forces as well is a very, very live issue this week. 43 police services in England and Wales, just one in Scotland, just one in Northern Ireland. Cliff has given me a ring from Slovakia. Cliff, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say on this?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for taking a call. I was a policeman for 27 years. I served in 3 different forces. Everyone did it differently. And really, I think Peter Bexley he sort of took most of what I was going to say in terms of cost. 43 police...
a lot of duplication, isn't there, Cliff? There's must be a load of duplication. Every one of them will have an HR department. Every one of them will have back office staff. And some of that surely could be put together if you've got larger forces.
Exactly. And you've got 43 chief constables. In fact, you've got more than that because the College of Policing, goodness knows why, needs a chief constable and a deputy chief constable. Both earning, I guess, around 170 to 200 grand a year.
Yeah.
And so if you reduce the amount of forces, and some of these forces are tiny and are already working in amalgamation in terms of specialist services.
Yes.
So there's a great deal of saving to be done, and I know the Police Scotland project was quite toothy and it took a little while to get going, but I think generally, if I'm calling a police officer, I don't really care what badge.
Well, as long as they turn up, Cliff. Cliff, crazy idea here, Cliff. Police England, one police force. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay, very, very interesting. Yeah. Well, listen, thanks for your call. Really appreciate it. I think Cliff maybe had a final thought there. Let's not cut him off. Cliff, sorry, you had something else to say there?
Yeah, I think it won't be without pain and discomfort, but I think once it's enabled properly and it's structured correctly, I think it's going to be a vast improvement.
Okay. Cliff, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Really appreciate them. Thanks to everybody else who's been in touch as well. Peter says, if you're ill and going out with a mask on, you haven't got flu. When you have flu, you can barely get out of bed. Steve in Kimberley in Nottinghamshire says, morning, Peter, loving the show. My partner was told last night that she and her 5 colleagues are being redundant on December the 19th. Goodness me. After 11 years. The owners haven't taken a wage since April. Have chosen to walk away after 19 years before the lease on their cafe needs to be renewed in January because it's just not worth the hassle anymore. Great work and Merry Christmas, Ms. Reeves. Goodness me, Steve, I'm so sorry to hear what has happened to Marcia, your partner there. There's so many people in a similar position, and certainly what you're describing there is all too familiar, and it's these small businesses with small numbers of people working for them that are being affected most dramatically by all of this. Lots more to talk about, including the big puberty blockers controversy. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes here on Talk. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell in for Julia Hartley-Brewer today. She's not well, she'll be back on Monday hopefully. We wish you all the very best, Julia, for a full recovery very, very soon. We'll get you back on the air and hear your wisdom. Lots to discuss, including on puberty blockers, a big controversy today. We'll be talking about that. This is a trial facing a legal challenge over a danger to children. Campaigners say they have grave legal concerns about NHS treatment which may cause irreversible harm, they say. Plenty of people getting in touch about it as well. Maybe you have some thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. We've already had Elisa in Chelmsford, her voice note a bit earlier on saying experiments of children are being treated like guinea pigs in all of this. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. We've been talking as well about bills. The Prime Minister saying energy bills are going down. That is not the experience of basically every single person who has contacted me this morning, and indeed previously when I put this online yesterday. We'll be talking too about Kemi Badenoch saying that Starmer is a caretaker Prime Minister. What do you think about that? And Maccabi Tel Aviv, the big controversy there as well about the evidence presented to Parliament about the decision to ban the supporters. It was a big story a couple of weeks ago when the match actually happened, but was Parliament and were we told the truth about all of that? Now we have a chief constable, we believe it's the first time that's ever happened, that has been recalled to Parliament because the evidence was not right, and that's the charitable interpretation, let me tell you. We'll talk about that. Also, boycott Coca-Cola ads popping up across London's transport system as well, and Hamas hiding, terrorists hiding tons of baby formula to damage Israel with a starvation claim. That is according to a Palestinian activist. Also, do you believe the BBC is biased towards the cities? Has it got a metropolitan bias? That's the allegation, certainly, that various people have been talking about. We'll talk about to the Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance about that too. Loads to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock when Ian Collins is coming up. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, 0344 499 1000. That's the number for WhatsApp, text messages as well, and of course for phone calls too. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. And I should say I'm in this slot tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday between 10 and 1, all 4 days. Today, tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday. Loads to discuss, of course, and on Sunday we will be having some big political interviews as well, as we always do on my weekend shows. And whether I'm here during the week or whether I'm here at the weekends, as always, it's all about you. So do get in touch. It's my show, but it's your show too. Well, it's Julia's show today, but you know what I mean. Lots of people getting in touch about their bills. Darren in Bradford saying, I have an interesting phone call with Octopus, the energy company. I set up my gas and electric in November for £88.67 a month. They failed to take a payment or standing order on the 2nd of December, so I called them and they said, no problem, we'll take it out on the 2nd of January. I said I did not agree. It's now currently in a massive argument with them. What a joke. Well, there's just loads of people who say their bills are going up, and what the Prime Minister says isn't quite true. But I want to talk about another issue now, that's puberty blockers. The NHS puberty blocker trial facing a legal challenge over the lifelong harm it poses to children. Health officials have approved the trial to give more than 200 gender questioning children puberty blockers last month. Faced an immediate backlash, of course. 226 children are going to be treated for gender dysphoria by an NHS specialist clinic, given the drugs, monitored by researchers from King's College London. It's been condemned as unethical by the leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch. Let's find out what Maya Forstater thinks. She's Chief Executive of Sex Matters. Maya, there are many, many people very worried about this, the fact that children are being given these puberty blockers, when actually we know certainly the damage they can do.
Yes, the Shadow Minister called it state-sponsored chemical castration, and I think that's what it is. It's stopping a child's natural puberty, ostensibly to give them time to think, but we know that 98% of children that went on to these puberty blockers when they were given before the ban then went on to cross-sex hormones, which leaves them sterilised and without adult sexual function, and causes harm to brain development and bone development, all kinds of health problems.
There's a woman called Kira Bell who detransitioned after going under the treatment as a teenager. There's a lot of people worrying that these children who have gender dysphoria or been diagnosed with gender dysphoria certainly may not be making a decision in their best interests in the long term, Maya, and actually do they know perhaps that this is a decision they're making that is something that would have lifelong consequences, yet they're making it at a very, very young age?
Exactly. I mean, these children are 10, 11, 12, 13. They're too young to make these kinds of lifelong decisions. They have got an idea into their head that they could live as the opposite sex. It's not clear to them what that could mean. You know, what does it mean to be an adult, to grow up, to have a job, to get married, to have children? All of those things are really impossible for a 12 or 13-year-old to understand. They should be concentrating on school, friends, getting their GCSEs, not stopping their puberty.
What do you make of what happens now, these legal challenges and so on? What do you expect to happen next, Maya?
I think it's good that these legal challenges are being brought. This is a government-sponsored trial. It's being carried out by King's College London, but it's funded by the NHS, and it's been allowed by the Health Secretary, who banned puberty blockers after the CAS review because there was no evidence that they do any good, but left a loophole to allow a study. But if you're going to have a study, the study has to be able to show results that make sense. And the design of this study, this is what's being questioned by the legal challenge, is it's not designed in a way that can show you whether puberty blockers work to help children grow up and live a long and happy life. Yeah. It's being monitored over a very short term, and there's effectively no control group. What they're doing is they're giving puberty blockers to 200 plus children, dividing them into two groups, one group that will get the puberty blockers now and one group that will get them in a year. And then they're going to compare those two groups. So these are children who very strongly want something that they think will help them, and they're being given it. And then they're going to be asked, do you feel happy? And it's that measurement of a child's short-term happiness is being offset against their long-term health.
I mean, that is such a short period of time, and of course you may or may not feel happy for lots of different reasons, especially as a teenager, especially when your body is going through changes, although if you're certainly if you have puberty blockers. I mean, it just strikes me as absolutely grotesque that this is happening. If people want to do this in adulthood, is that something you would support? Perhaps not support, but certainly say, well, actually, there's a greater case if someone has a sentient adult who has their own thoughts that they want to put this stuff inside their bodies or similar things to transition, that is something they should be allowed to do as a sentient adult. What do you think?
I mean, I think there's a question about whether this is medicine, and there are certainly things that people can do as an adult that they have a free choice to do. They can get tattoos on their face if they want. Whether the rest of us think that's a good idea or not is a different question. Sure. And whether the National Health Service should fund it as medicine is also a different question. All medicine should be based on evidence, and actually there's a very weak evidence base that any of this helps people at all. And also it's all based on basically an impossible dream that somebody can live as the opposite sex and force other people to accept them as the opposite sex.
Is this just ideology rather than medicine, perhaps?
It is. That's what it is. And when it slams up against reality, it's the people that have had these treatments who suffer.
And what would you say to the argument that there are young people who have dreadful lives, who have gone through an awful lot, even at a very, very young age, and they feel very, very strongly that they should be able to do this? What would if you were chatting to one of those young people who says, look, May, I totally get your opinions and your thoughts and all of this, but I've thought about this long and hard. I've gone through various bits of psychological therapy. I've spoken to doctors. My parents are in favour of this and they want me to be happy and to deal with this. What would your message be to those young people who would say, actually, this is my decision and my body?
I don't think this decision should be given to children. I don't think it's medicine. There's no evidence for it. And many of the children who will be on this pathway are autistic. Many of them are same-sex attracted. They're come to terms with their sexual orientation. They may not understand it. They may be growing up in a homophobic family. All of these factors come to bear, and these children are just too young to make decisions that are irreversible about their bodies.
Mayor, I just wonder how confident you are that the legal challenge will succeed. It's hard to know in these cases, certainly. And what's your message to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, about all of this?
I think ultimately it's his responsibility, and the damage that will be done to these children is going to be on him and on the government. So he should think again. Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's Mayor Forsater there, who is the Chief Executive of Sex Matters. Anne in Sussex has given me a ring about this on 0344 499 1000. Anne, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, thank you, Peter. Lovely to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
I spent many years with families and vulnerable children, and many with mental health issues. And my concern is the whole system for child mental health is appalling. Something called MASH, and the long waits, but also the drugs that children can be given, when in reality no drugs are tested on children. They're often drugs that are intended for adults. And the outcome from some of those drugs is severe depression, even suicide, and utter mental health issues and confusion, increasingly worse. We need to do better. I do not know, what is going on. Is it, while I was waiting, after I rung, I thought, we do not know the effect of the pill in our waters. Years ago, the fish in the River Ex were all female. Is there also other reasons that are affecting sexual genders and disorders? But one of the big ones is autosuggestion, and there's so much now that you can be a girl. I remember about 7 years ago, a little boy crying because he'd been told at school he could be a girl if he wanted to. It wasn't in the public arena then. And this push that is coming from somewhere about confusing children at an early age.
Well, I just think very, very strongly we should allow children to be children, and these big, incredibly life-changing decisions should be for, if they're to be taken at all, should be for a much, much later period. Anne, thank you for your thoughts this morning. That's Anne in Sussex, or sorry, this afternoon. That's Anne in Sussex there. Paul in Fife says the bottom line with puberty blockers and children, the buck stops with the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. He's given the go-ahead for this. Paul says, so police forces in England will be merged into 12 forces from the existing 43. It's madness. Why hasn't the government looked at Scotland, where they scrapped 8 forces that served us well for a decade and produced Police Scotland, which I can say without contradiction is a total shambles, says Paul. Here's a question I keep asking myself. Why would the President of the United States, Trump, consider Starmer a friend? Why does he persist in saying Starmer is doing a great job? Starmer is the polar opposite of Trump. Never in a million years would they be friends. As for doing a great job, every policy that Starmer brings forward and implements. Again, the polar opposite of what Trump believes in. Why does Trump not call him out? I'm a huge Trump fan. I admire his straight talking. Why does he pussyfoot around where Starmer is concerned? I don't get it. Starmer is a weak and pitiful MP, and Trump knows it. Thank you to Reg, who says the water meter scam is a scam. We were told to switch because there are only 2 of us living in the house. We don't have a bath. We only shower. There was a hosepipe ban all summer, so we couldn't use the hose in my garden. Our water has gone up by £5 a month with the meter, says Reg. And Paul, another Paul says over the past 20 years approximately there have been a recorded 9,500 deaths directly attributed to flu, claimed more lives than COVID ever did. We've never worn masks before. We should never ever again. Older people less able to recover from flu. Young healthy people will be ill for a couple of weeks but do recover. It's just another NHS scare story. Never forget the NHS was complicit in the COVID lies, in Paul's opinion. Thank you so much for that. We'll get to more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes next. If you want to get in touch, the number is, of course, 0344 499 1000. Whether you're thinking about puberty blockers, whether you're talking about what the government is talking about with bills, energy bills, and whether you believe the Chancellor that national insurance is something which has not fueled unemployment, well, you can get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss here on Talk.
some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Adam's been in touch on the puberty blocker story we were talking about just before the break there. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Adam, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
No, it's just, I don't understand the argument. It's absolute insanity. It's child abuse. The only thing you look at, I'm not in that situation, but I just go from my experience. I can ask my lad, my young son, I can ask him from the ages of 4 till now, 12, what do you want to be? I want to be Spider-Man.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be a dinosaur when I was 5. Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to happen, but, brilliant. Someone to aspire to a hero, and I try and use the positive, use intelligence stuff, but you're never going to cling to a wall. You're only going to swing through. So, but then at the age now, he's coming round, to things, and he's starting to say, I want to be a scientist.
Yes.
God knows what he's going to say when he's 16 or 18. He's going to want to be a doctor or something else.
Well, exactly. And you don't know at that stage. I mean, there are people who are, I'm 41, and some people at that age still don't know what they want out of life. And that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to say to a 12 or 13-year-old you're going to make an absolutely major, life-changing decision about puberty blockers, to me, is wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You just can't. I mean, the thing is, as well, what people are forgetting is they're trying to change this rhetoric. People are born differently all the time. Some people are born without the use of the legs or their eyes. You don't say to them, oh, one day and you're just going to see one day, or you're going to walk one day. No, you got to adapt to your life. You got to find the love of your life and find who you are, and not what you can define. You can't define. You're born gay, you're born this, you're born that, but you still got to accept the biological reality of your life.
Adam, I just agree with you, and I think there are a lot of teenagers who have a really difficult time. There are a lot of adults who have a really difficult time when they worry about these things, when it's a major issue in their life. I don't want to make any person who is having these feelings, who wants to transition in some way or live their life as a man or a woman or whatever, call yourself whatever you like, but just don't tell me that you are actually a man or a woman, because biological sex, as the Supreme Court has reiterated, is factual, it is there, and we need to be cognizant of that. Whilst I have absolute sympathy for people who are in that position, I don't want to make their lives any more difficult than they already are. Certainly I don't want to demonise them, I don't want to say they're bad people at all, but you've also got to deal with biological fact. Yes. Let's talk about the police now. First of all, thank you to Adam for that. That's Adam in Nottingham there. Adam, actually, sorry, did you have another thought? I don't mean to cut you off. Did you have another thought there?
No, you said it. I don't want to be mean.
No, and you're not. You're just dealing with facts, and you're dealing with the issue.
Believe your fantasy, and I only see reality.
Yeah. Well, listen, you make some really good points there, Adam. Thank you for that. Daryl has been in touch about another big issue, actually, reform of our police services. There's Police Scotland, there's the Police Service of Northern Ireland, and there is in England and Wales for the case that it is there are 43 separate police services. Daryl, what do you think about this? You were in the police yourself, I think.
Yeah, I was in Lincolnshire Police for 31 years. I first joined in 1989, and I worked, for most of those years, I worked in control rooms. And I saw centralisation happen in Lincolnshire Police when they, because Lincolnshire is a huge rural county in the east, Midlands, a very rural area with lots of farming communities and villages. And when I first joined the police and worked in the control room, I was stationed in Boston, and we had 5 divisions in Lincolnshire, and each division had its own control room, and it worked very well. But they centralised that control room to Nettleham headquarters near Lincoln, and when they did that, at first it seemed like a good idea, money-saving idea, and so on and so forth. But as time went on, you could see the failings in it, especially, that control room was then filled with people who primarily lived in the Lincoln area, and they'd never heard of some of the places.
And you need that local knowledge, don't you, when you're making those very rapid rapid decisions, Darryl, aren't you?
Well, the local knowledge was lost. And to give you an example, you'd get somebody from a farm in a place like Gedney Drove End, which is right on the far side of South Lincolnshire and middle of nowhere. And a person in Lincoln control room, they would never have even heard of it. And they'd be trying to send officers on an emergency 999 call to say a burglary in progress where the suspects were armed, and they'd be trying to send officers there, and they'd have to try and find it on the map. Locally.
Well, look, the picture you paint there, Darryl, is not a positive one, and clearly there are many issues when forces are centralised, and that is there's clear problems, and certainly we've had that echoed from people in Scotland who've been talking about Police Scotland and the 8 forces there coming together. Darryl, thanks very much for your message there. Sean in West Yorkshire says the puberty blocker trial proposed by the Health Secretary, surely the proposal, and each trial candidate would have to pass an ethics committee. I'm interested to learn who's part of the ethics committee and what data and information they will look at. What can we learn from all of that? All information should be in the public domain. I think this would be an abhorrent and dangerous idea. I would like to think that anyone with an ounce of common sense can see that, says Sean in West Yorkshire, so thank you to that. And Dan in Leek in Staffordshire says, afternoon Peter, great show, thank you Dan. On national insurance going up, it did affect jobs. We got paid above the minimum wage, but when the rises come in, we had to go down to minimum wage to keep our jobs. So in effect, we had a pay cut because of the rubber Rachel thieves. So she is lying again. Well, thank you for that, Dan. Just a bit of news that has emerged in the last few minutes. That's that more than 600 artefacts of significant cultural value, we're told, have been stolen from Bristol Museum's archive in a high-value raid. 4 men gained entry to a building in the Cumberland Basin area of Bristol in the early hours of the 25th of September, according to Avon on Somerset. Police items from the museum's British Empire and Commonwealth collection were stolen. Detectives are now trying to trace 4 men captured in the area on CCTV. So a little update in all of that. Let's speak to Peter in Buckinghamshire about the Ukraine story we were talking about, the elections that we've talked about, and Mary Dejevsky talking about that, Trump saying that they should be held, Putin saying that they should be held. Peter, what's your reading on this situation?
Yeah, there's 2 ways of taking over a country. One is by force. 2, you only have to look at the Georgian dream in Georgia and what happened there. You have to look at the power of the media, the propaganda, how things can be manipulated. And you say, no wonder Putin wants an election. It's nothing to do with him dealing with somebody else. Nothing to do at all. He is going to go all out to manipulate this election. I also asked the question, how are you going to get people in the occupied areas of Ukraine to vote?
Nonetheless, is it not a legitimate thing to say, okay, yes, Ukraine has been at war, but there has not been an election since 2019, and in the last 6 years a lot has changed, and perhaps Zelensky's legitimacy isn't there?
I don't see it. Zelensky is skin and bones. You have to get to find out what the will of the people are in Ukraine. And I know Ukraine quite well. I went there loads and loads and loads of times as a pilot. From 2014 up until the war broke out.
Okay.
But the thing is, you have to. I said Zelensky is skin and bones. Another leader is skin and bones. They're open to manipulation. They're open to being bought out. There's a massive amount of corruption from Russia. So what you do, you have a simple, because Putin is not interested in peace. We have to get it into our heads. He is not interested in peace. All this agreement will be a lull. Okay. And then he will attack again. It'll be a false flag attack on Russia, which he'll blame Ukraine for, and he'll say the deal's all off. We're now ready to go back in and finish it off.
What do you think Putin actually wants? Does he just want the Donbass? Does he want all of Ukraine?
No, he wants the whole of Ukraine. He wants the Baltics back.
Okay.
And hence you'll find he's also demanding that through Trump that NATO is weakened, and so he can do that.
Okay.
So yeah.
But we haven't actually seen any real evidence, Peter, have we, that he could take all of Ukraine, or that he's even tried to? There was a feint on Kyiv, certainly, and attacks there.
Just ridiculous 28-point plan.
Just let me finish the point, Peter. There was that military feint on Kyiv, for example, but aside from the eastern part of the country, and after a number of years of war, he's only managed to get a fifth of the country.
Yeah, because you've got to remember, they're losing. I know Ukrainians are losing a lot, but Russia are losing 1,000 lives a day in this.
So if that's the case, which I'm sure it is, Peter, where do you get the sort of thought that actually he may want all of Ukraine, but militarily that's just not possible, is it? And we keep hearing that he wants to go westward as well. I mean, the evidence just not there to support that, is it?
Not at the moment, and this is why he wants the lull, because he's economically they're in a really bad situation. Militarily, Russia are in a bad situation, and he needs to build that up.
Okay.
Once he has built that up, he will attack again, as sure as light is day. And unless if Trump is so convinced that Putin is an honourable man who's going to keep to this deal, why not put the security guarantees in? And Trump won't do that.
Well, we'll keep a very close. Okay, we'll keep a very close eye on all of that, certainly here on Talk. Peter, thanks for your points there, Peter, in Buckinghamshire there. If you'd like to get on the air in the last 29 minutes of the programme, you're very welcome to do what Peter did, which is lift the phone and give us a shout on 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in a second about an absolute scandal in regard to West Midlands Police. The Chief Constable and Assistant Chief Constable have been recalled to Parliament. First time ever, we think anyway, that the Chief Constable of any force has been called back to Parliament, to a parliamentary committee, because of the shoddy nature of the evidence. This is about Maccabi Tel Aviv, the football team that played Aston Villa, and the fact that their fans were banned. There's a number of other stories I want to ask Johnny Gould, the journalist and broadcaster, about as well, including boycott Coca-Cola ads, which are popping up across London's transport network as well. TfL have been in touch with us this morning. We asked them for a statement, and they said they're not authorised by them or their advertising partners. We'll talk more about that in just a second. We'll take your views too. We're also asking the question about whether you think the BBC is too focused on our cities, particularly London. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Just having a look through some of my messages on Twitter there over the break. Thanks to everybody who has sent them through. Elisa in Chelmsford, who says, I'm very concerned about our police forces. As someone who served for 25 years in London, I was also proud of what I did and proud of my colleagues. However, since the 7th of October, so much seems to have been questionable. I'd be very interested to see what happens with West Midlands Police, and like you, I'd like an update from Avon and Somerset Police. This is, of course, about Bob Villan. They appear to have spoken to Pascal Robinson Foster, who is the lead singer, I say that in the loosest possible terms, of Bob Villan. They appear to have spoken to him. No arrests have been made so far. That is a long, long time after the death of the IDF chants that were made at Glastonbury. We'll talk more about that in a second. Elisa continues, I really hope that in the not too distant future things can be turned around again and the trust in the police will be restored. Great show. Thank you for that, Elisa. Thanks also to Mad Catwoman 67, I love some of these names, on Twitter, who says puberty blockers for children are child abuse. Anyone involved in this ghoulish practice must be prosecuted. Most of these children will be gay or have mental health issues, should be treated as such. Ray says, Peter, Police England, honestly, a chief inspector in Penzance fed up with a particular officer. PC Jones, next Monday you start work in Newcastle. Another person says, politically mandated medical experiments on children to placate a twisted ideology. Where have we heard that before, Peter? You're not the first person to make that point. And D says, my energy bills have just gone up again. Well, I want to talk to Johnny Gould now, one of my favourite guests, journalist and broadcaster, king amongst men, gentleman as well, about what is happening with the police boss. This is the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, who's been recalled to Parliament over shoddy evidence and falsehoods, allegedly, after the ban of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from Aston Villa. Johnny knows these issues inside out and is also an Aston Villa super fan himself. Johnny, some of the evidence that was given was just plain wrong.
It was really a total inversion of what happened. They took the Amsterdam report and switched it around. They said that Israeli fans, there were some ultras among them, but that they were going into Muslim communities and causing disruption. In fact, there was a WhatsApp group, as we know, with 900 members. Within that communication were things like a Jew hunt. There was someone thrown into the river. They said it was a local thrown in by a Maccabi fan. It was the other way around, and they said that you can only come out of the canal if you say Free Palestine. I met someone who was badly beaten and ran to his hotel room for cover, and the report included, didn't it, that West Ham Maccabi game that not even the Pools panel could sort of verdict out because it could never happen. It's what we call in AI, I learnt today, garbage. It's when you report something from AI but you don't check the facts, because sometimes, or quite a lot actually, AI pulls out things which they completely make up. So don't use AI,
I've certainly had that experience myself, Johnny. Yeah. I mean, you've got a chief constable and an assistant chief constable who came out and said the threat was from Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. You know and I know that some of them are thugs. A small number are thugs who do questionable or indeed horrible things. But the fact that all fans were banned was based on false evidence, and the threat, it would appear to be anyway, given that there were skirmishes, there were trouble, and there was trouble and there were arrests, even when the fans were banned, actually came from some Islamists who protested that match.
And indeed, and who are we being protected against? Because once the Jews were expunged from Aston, they still had 700 police there. There still was a massive camp, literally on the grass verge, standing underneath the extension of the Trinity Road stand. I was there, I recorded it, I saw it. And what was being said by the Islamist preacher was, potty-mouthed. It was disgusting. It was full of lies. I was told at one point that one of the preachers had checked the DNA of Benjamin Netanyahu, decided he was Polish and that he should go back to Poland. The audience cheered. It's horrible. He was born, by the way, in Tel Aviv, and he grew up in Jerusalem, so we don't need any of that nonsense.
Well, there's so many horrible tropes.
All of it was rubbish.
Being thrown around. Also, in the pro-Palestinian side of things, we have boycott Coca-Cola ads, pop popping up across London's transport network. I should say we have a statement from Transport for London on this, who says these posters are not authorised by TfL, Transport for London, nor advertising partners, and we've instructed our teams and contractors to remove any that are found on the network. And these things themselves are boycott Coca-Cola ads popping up across London's underground. This is a Free Palestine crowd, another round of anti-Israel propaganda. The actual advertisement itself has a sort of looking like a kind of Santa's boot on a Coca-Cola can. Boycott Coca-Cola. It's canned on stolen Palestinian land, and that is apparently by the Palestine Solidarity Committee. Their logo is on there. Whether they have put them up or not, I don't know. We have contacted them this morning. They haven't got back to us. What do you make of this?
Well, they're good at this, Peter. It's been going on for a year or two, hasn't it? I mean, we saw on bus shelters some lies about Israel, which took a while to be reported and taken away. Meanwhile, I was standing at a bus stop yesterday and I saw a legal ad from the Egyptian Tourist Board telling us that if you go to Egypt, you can get diversity unmatched. In a community where the Christian Coptic community, thousands of years old, some of the first Christians in the world, are leaving in fright, and where the Jewish community, over thousands of years, they've been left to zero. There are no Jews left in Egypt. So I don't know what kind of diversity they're trying to unmatch with anywhere else, but maybe we're getting to the crux of what diversity truly means with that idea of diversity unmatched in Egypt, Peter.
Well, certainly. There's a number of other, I mean, there's so much around I want to talk to you about. I noticed this from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism putting this out today about Hamas allegedly, the terrorists, hiding tons of baby formula to damage Israel with starvation claims. I mean, there's very little that Hamas would not do to damage Israel, will attempt anyway to win the propaganda war, and so much murkiness in regard to the actual food aid and how that got through or didn't get through during the Gaza war, and indeed is still getting through, Johnny.
Yeah, they kept on giving aid. They flooded Gaza with aid in spite of the overwhelming evidence that Hamas was stealing it. I mean, there are videos. If you go to Imshin on X, you will see the Gaza you don't see. And what's so fantastic about her X feed is that it's videos shot by Gazans. In other words, it's what they want you to see. And if only mainstream media were actually able to come up from their rabbit holes and actually report what has been going on, then it might affect the debate. Meanwhile, a lot of nations are beginning to defund UNRWA as well, finally. So maybe some kind of justice will prevail in this terrible 2-year war.
Well, it's about time with UNRWA, who have absolutely no moral authority whatsoever. Very interesting tweet as well from Melanie Phillips, the columnist, earlier today, talking about Israeli scientists just delivering a miracle at the world's top cancer conference, a new treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma, showing a 100% survival rate, almost no radiation needed. Melanie Phillips says, wonderful, transformative, life-saving development for humanity. How sad, therefore, that sufferers from Hodgkin's lymphoma who back a boycott of Israel will naturally refuse such treatment.
Absolutely. I do remember Neil Ferguson, the well-known historian and philosopher, saying many, many years ago that the reason why nations like Israel create such innovation is that tragically that their lives are sped up with a necessity is the mother of invention. One of the reasons why the European continent became so powerful 300 and 400 years ago is because we kept on fighting each other. And of course, what we're beginning to see with Israel in this terrible war is new innovation, which I think the world will need as rural populations move into urban societies. We're going to start seeing warfare like Gaza in other parts of the world. So the world needs Israel.
Yeah. Just finally, before you go, Iceland becoming the 5th country to boycott Israel in next year's Eurovision. Do you care?
Well, I did watch in revulsion quite a lot of Eurovision last year, so any sort of moral cleansing of these awful acts actually might help Eurovision, because again it has disappeared through a sort of diversity and multiculturalist rabbit hole, and it is quite awful to watch some of it, and it's supposed to be a family show.
Yeah, and actually it was the first transgender person. It was Dana International for Israel, who won a number of years ago with Viva La Diva. Well, Viva Johnny Gould.
In Birmingham.
In Birmingham. Viva Johnny Gould is all I can say. The journalists and broadcasters, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate that. We haven't heard from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and we haven't heard from Coca-Cola either. If they get in touch in the next 16 minutes, I will of course read out their statement. If they don't, if they get in touch, later on today, I'll read out their statement tomorrow. But I did read out that statement from Transport for London on that story. Lots more to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Ian Collins will be coming up at 1 o'clock, of course. We will be talking in just a second to the Countryside Alliance about allegations that the BBC is too focused on London. As I said earlier on today, 82% of our viewers and listeners here at Talk are outside London. We're really, really careful. I might be sitting in a studio in London, but that doesn't mean the whole story is about London or the whole show is about London, and it really infuriates me when people just assume that people know where, Ladbroke Grove is or whatever, when you wouldn't dream of talking about a suburb of, the city of Lincoln, for example, and expecting people to know what it's all about. We'll speak to Tim Bonner in just a second. I'd like your views on this too, and everything else. I'll try and fit in a couple more calls between now and 1 o'clock. The number, of course, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Everybody feels that even if you don't like a parent, but when they've had such a terrible thing, he's nearly died, he's had most of his leg taken away, you can go back and say, look, let's start again, let's be kind, I'm so sorry about this, why don't I show you the pictures of the children? There's loads of things that you can do, but I think that people feel that she's got no right to do nothing, especially he doesn't seem to have done anything wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks everybody who's been in touch, including on Twitter. Oh, I had it a second ago and now it's disappeared. Let me get it back here. Nope, still can't find it. Sorry about that. Paul in Horsham says, great show as usual. Regarding the underground ads, I don't drink fizzy drinks, but I'm just off to buy some Coca-Cola. This is about the boycott of Coca-Cola. That is what the Palestine Solidarity Committee want us to do. What I would say to them is cheers, as I have a little drink of my Diet Coke here. There we go. Amanda in London says, how did our country sink to such depths? Nothing shocks us these days. Where will it all end? And what kind of future awaits? Utilise young people's talents onwards and upwards, says Amanda in London. Well, let's talk about the BBC, because they've been accused of imposing a metropolitan bias on country people with its North London socialism and use of Chris Packham. This is a new survey by the regional Merlin Group. 38% of rural people feel the broadcaster's coverage is inaccurate. Only 2% 30% said it was very accurate, 29% called it fairly accurate. Tell us what you think. Tim Bonner, he's Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance. Do you think the BBC, and maybe the media more generally, actually, but let's talk specifically about the BBC, actually understands the countryside, Tim?
Well, there are pockets of understanding, but frankly, with the BBC especially, the metropolitan bias line, and this is really important, didn't come from me, it didn't come from the Moreland groups, it came from the BBC Trust. 10 years ago, the BBC Trust did a review of its rural programming, and it said that it had a metropolitan bias. So we've been waiting 10 years, 11 years now for a proper response to that, for something to happen within the core, especially of the BBC's news operation, that does give some real voice to rural people, that ensures that we are represented properly. 5 years ago, Tim Davie, the outgoing DG, when he came in, he said that if you're an opinionated political campaigner, that you shouldn't be working for the BBC. And yet there are a number of high-profile presenters who work for the BBC who continue to essentially throw insults and drive their agenda against rural people and against rural activities.
What is it they don't understand? What are the rural activities or the bits of rural life that you think should be covered in a different way?
I think there's good coverage about the countryside, but there's not a lot of coverage for the countryside. So Countryfile takes some criticism for the rural community. I actually think it's a really positive programme. It gets millions of people watching, but there's not a lot of depth to it. We need to be really honest about that. It doesn't dig down into the fundamental issues which are, for instance, causing so much change in the farming sector, which has a massive impact on our environment and on the countryside as a whole. There's a need, I think, for a more considered programming which really understands rural people and represents them. But fundamentally, I think this is about, and this was what the Trust report said 10 years ago, this is about the fact that when a BBC journalist, and they are just and many of them I know well and have worked with, but they are very often from urban backgrounds without a clear understanding of rural communities. When they get a story, the first people they go to are environmental groups, are not people within the rural community itself. Yeah. So putting in place a policy, having someone who represents, there used to be a BBC rural champion. He and I still haven't quite worked out how he championed the countryside, but he's left, and I don't think it's even been replaced. So there needs to be a core understanding that if you have a news gathering operation, if you have a huge bureaucracy like the BBC, and people there are drawn from urban backgrounds, there needs to be someone in there who's going to hold up their hand and say, hang on a second, have you thought about how this plays for people outside London?
It's ironic, isn't it, that the BBC lectures us so much about diversity and says it's a marvellously diverse institution, and in some ways it is, but in other ways it isn't at all. Class is something that I don't think is properly represented in the in many parts of the media, but certainly in the BBC. I don't think there are too many working class people, actual working class people, not people who pretend to be working class when actually they are now middle class, people who are actually properly from working class backgrounds who work for the BBC and aren't pretending but actually do. And similarly, people from rural backgrounds. I mean, that is true diversity. If you're going to have diversity, either have it or don't. It's not just about the colour of someone's skin or their religious background.
Absolutely, and the BBC Charter, if we go back to the very basis here, the BBC Charter talks about a BBC which is representing all the communities of the United Kingdom, and fundamentally it doesn't as far as rural people are concerned. And we're not asking for special favours, we're just asking for people to remember that when you're having a discussion, for instance about road pricing, we had the Chancellor introducing road pricing, and everyone just sort of nods. Well, hang on, think about people who live out in the countryside who have to drive 30 miles to the
they don't get it, and
it just goes over their head.
And the thing, one thing, there's so many parts of the media that are talk all the time about trains, for example. I mean, the vast majority of journeys in this country are made by car, and if you use public transport, you're far more likely to use a bus than a train. I mean, I would honestly look at the BBC's transport coverage and question whether they got those facts. So this comes into so many different areas. Tim, fascinating to talk to you. There's Tim Bonner there, who's the Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance. I remember there was a tornado in North London at one point. I promise you, on the BBC News Channel, they did a half-hour special. I do wonder if that had happened in Lincolnshire, whether they would have done the same thing. Let's take a couple of quick calls before I speak to Ian Collins about what's coming up in his programme. Tarquin is first. Tarquin's in London on puberty blockers. Tarquin, you're very welcome to the programme. Go ahead.
Great show, Peter, as usual. Great
Thank
show.
you.
Just a quick one on this puberty. I have phoned in on this before, but something just occurred to me, something that you dug up earlier in the show. I can't remember what that point was, but it was basically the point where I think this whole puberty blockers experimentation is, as many people said, it's akin to the Mengele thing. And I think there is a law in place, international treaty, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it's something like the Nuremberg Code, Peter, and I think that these sorts of experiments on people, and certainly it has to be informed consent, and it isn't, because you're dealing with minors here. They get the children, so they can't be informed consent. So I think this is some sort of crime against humanity. This is very serious, and I want to have the spotlight shone on the Tavistock Institute whole, because I think that what they're up to is basically it's egregious and it's inhumane.
Well, certainly there have been many changes from what Tavistock was getting away with. Tarquin, you make some good points there, and thank you for them. Mike's been in touch on Twitter and says, I wonder if the rise of young boys wanting to transition is influenced by all the misandry in the media and schools. Misogyny, obviously, hatred of women, misandry, hatred of men. Boys and men are constantly demonised. Incidents like boys in schools made to apologise to girls because of historical crimes of males. Stuart says, amazing, isn't it, Peter, that horrible racist lowlife Bob Villan can say and sing about pure hatred of the Jews in Israel live on the woke BBC, and nothing happens to him, while patriotic Brits get years in jail for tweets and messages on Facebook. Just how disgusting and traitorous is this horrible Labour government? Well, I do think even on Somerset Police need to charge him, or need to recommend that he's charged to the CPS. We'll see what happens. Certainly arrests haven't been made yet, and they absolutely should have been, and allegations will continue about the clock being run down. Paul says, Zelensky, has anyone ever asked this guy to explain and validate his own personal wealth? This guy owns multi-million-pound properties all over the world. He's a former stand-up comedian. Where does the extraordinary wealth come from? And Debbie says, on puberty blockers, in my opinion, this is state-sponsored paedophilia. Why would these people want children to remain children? What's next? Do all the little girls who want to have a mummy have the right to have babies? It's sick and dangerous, and these so-called doctors need to be stopped. Herbie, final call of the day. Herbie has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Herbie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon. Well, Peter, this so-called £150 rebate for your electricity and everything, what's a damn joke? It's going to cost us more than that in the increasing cost of living because of the energy crisis that keeps putting the products and produce up. It's ridiculous. We're not going to save anything. It's going to cost us even more money than it's ever done before.
And so many people, Herbie, are getting in touch talking about the fact that their bills have gone up. And yeah, there may be some reductions here, there, or whatever, but the net result is that those bills are still very, very high.
And they don't need to be. You know, this government's got no clue, no idea how to run any industry or any business whatsoever, Peter. And we're going to end up paying the price because of this inadequate. I don't know. I've just lost faith in this government completely. They do not know what to do, Peter. They've lost it.
Well, thank you, Herbie. I think a lot of our viewers and listeners will agree with what you have to say. We've covered a lot of topics today, and I know that Ian Collins in the next 3 hours is going to cover even more. Ian, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much. It's always interesting to see Labour MPs losing their mind. They're losing their mind over Mike Tapp, of course, the Home Office Minister, who made that announcement about looking at ethnicity, religion and background, etc., when it comes to grooming gangs. I think that's a fairly fundamental question. In fact, it would be horrendous if you didn't consider that.
Absolutely.
Like in many other crimes, you might consider that as well. But of course, some have decided that this is straight out of the BNP playbook to even go
nonsense.
There. I mean, it's utterly... This is the kind of mentality that we have running our system at the moment. Now, OK, the Home Secretary, she's a senior Labour figure. This has come from her office, and that's what they're going to factor into the grooming gangs, and so they should as well. But it's just interesting to see people believe that this is somehow crossing a line into not just right-wing territory, but sort of